Most people are familiar with the FBI's most wanted list, faces on posters, public tips, and nationwide manhunts. But today, we're getting into a different list, a list most people never see, because the CIA doesn't have a most wanted list. They keep a targets captured list. No bounties, no press, no warnings, just silent pursuit until the target is either captured or eliminated. If the CIA targets you, it's not a question of if, only when they'll take you out. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is 1 million subscribers. And without further ado, let's get into the CIA's Most Wanted Explained. And before we begin, a quick note: the CIA doesn't maintain a public most wanted list, and anything current is classified. So in this video, we'll be covering individuals whose cases have been declassified, targets who have already been captured, exposed, or neutralized. And these are the men the CIA eventually let the world see. Rafael Caro Quintero. Rafael Caro Quintero, or Rafa for short, was a Mexican drug trafficker in the 70s and 80s. He was long described as the co-founder of the Guadalajara cartel and as one of the godfathers of the modern Mexican drug trade. Let's call it the G cartel for short, considering just how hard the name is to say over and over again. The G cartel was one of the first ever cartels to traffic booger sugar and cannabis into the US in the late 70s. But having a big cartel and title like the Godfather isn't enough for the CIA to come after you. You'd barely be a speck on their radar. The DEA, on the other hand, would be very interested in talking to you, but that's where it all went south. Rafa was born on the 24th of October 1952 in La Noria, a tiny village buried in a region full of major drug traffickers. He was the oldest of 12 children. His father was a farmer that died when Rafa was just 14 years old. He worked with his mother to take care of his family, becoming the next head of the house. 2 years later, he left the village and settled down in Cabaraca, a bigger town, where he became a rancher. Through all this time, he claimed his highest level of education was the first year of primary school. He worked as a rancher for another 2 years before he met Pedro Aviles Perez at 18. At this time, he had been working as a truck driver for a while, as well as other odd jobs such as working in a bean and corn plantation, anything to make ends meet. Pedro was a Mexican drug trafficker that taught him the art of planting marijuana, and so Rafa used some of his family's land to do so. But eventually, he left his home state altogether to join the drug trade in Chihuahua. Caro grew more and more marijuana on his brother's ranch, before earning enough to buy several other ranches in the surrounding areas, becoming richer, as well as becoming a lot more powerful. Soon enough, he formed the G cartel, with a few others in the late 70s. This cartel pioneered the drug trade. It was the first to do it, before almost anyone else on such a large scale. He began trafficking drugs into the US, and in only a few years was being described in Mexican media as one of the narco de narcos. He expanded the cartel even further, building the huge Rancho Buffalo weed plantation in Chihuahua, estimated to be around 1,000 hectares, roughly the size of an entire small town. This massive plantation would be used to produce billions of dollars worth of marijuana. It wasn't very long-lived though. On November 14, 1984, over 450 Mexican soldiers raided the ranch. They were acting on DEA intelligence and were armed, had helicopters, and successfully achieved their objective of seizing and burning the G cartel's product, wiping out 4,000 to 5,000 metric tons of marijuana. That's the same weight as around 1,000 fully grown elephants. This was marijuana worth several $billion. That's back in the early 80s. That'd be worth around $10 billion now. Rafa was angry. His beautiful ranch and marijuana all burnt to the ground. He wasn't just going to sit there and take it, and so he made possibly the worst decision that secured his fate. Remember how I said that simply being a drug lord isn't enough to get yourself on the CIA's radar? Well, Rafa's following actions was more than enough for the CIA to step in. He retaliated against the DEA by abducting undercover DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in broad daylight. If there's one thing governmental agencies hate more than drug lords, it's public humiliation. Another DEA agent was abducted on the same day, a pilot, Alfredo Zavala Avalar, who was flying reconnaissance. This all took place on the afternoon of February 7th, 1985. The abducted agents were taken to the heart of the cartel city of Guadalajara, the house proudly owned by Rafael Caro Quintero. The agents were tortured for an agonizing 30 whole hours before being murdered. Their bodies were found a month later, on March 5th, wrapped in plastic, buried in a shallow grave. And this launched the DEA's largest homicide investigation to date, Operation Leyenda. He was eventually arrested for the first of many times on April 4th, 1985. But how? Well, the DEA wasn't working alone. As it turns out, the CIA had kept tabs on Rafa for a while, but right after the kidnapping, they went all out. They gathered as much information on Rafa as possible to capture and arrest him, information the DEA would have never been able to get on their own. Once he'd been arrested, the CIA never took him off their radar. A year later, on January 12, 1986, they made a surprise, forceful search on Rafa's prison. They seized electrical appliances, jewels, and money, which added up to over 300 million pesos, worth almost 50 million US dollars today. The authorities blamed the guards for the corruption, and the guards blamed the authorities. He was extradited to Mexico on charges of murdering a DEA agent and sentenced to 199 years in prison for his crimes. The USA still has him listed as a wanted fugitive, waiting for their chance to put him on trial and sentence him their way. He was transferred from prison to prison, all while continuing to run his criminal enterprise from behind bars. He created money laundering fronts with gas stations, construction companies, shoe factories, restaurants, real estate, and much, much more. He was tossed around justice systems, and finally, on February 27, 2025, the Mexican government sent him to the United States of America so that they could finally have their day in court. The CIA, DEA, and DOJ will all be prosecuting Rafael Caro Quintero for his crimes. Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri. Abd al-Nahim Hussein Muhammad Abdul al-Nashiri, well, that's a mouthful, was born on January 5th, 1965 at Mecca. He is one of the most notorious individuals out there, being accused for the bombing of the USS Cole and other maritime attacks. He's also suspected of heading al-Qaeda operations in the Persian Gulf region, but in his case, the CIA's treatment of him is also criminal in nature. Although he was born in 1965, it was only when he was in his late 20s that he started taking action. He moved to Afghanistan in the early 90s to participate in attacks against the Russians in the region, with the USA supporting the Mujahideen's actions at the time. In 1996, he ended up meeting Osama bin Laden for the first time. It was here that bin Laden tried convincing him to join al-Qaeda, but al-Nashiri refused because, as it turned out, he found the idea of swearing a loyalty oath to bin Laden as distasteful. He then traveled to his home in Yemen, where he first started getting the ideas for his first operation. These ideas came to shape after he started noticing many US and other foreign ships along the southwest coast of Yemen. He went back to Afghanistan a year later, and this is when he started to take serious action. Nashiri met bin Laden again, but declined to join his group still, instead fighting with the Taliban against the Afghan Northern Alliance, and assisted in the smuggling of 4 anti-tank missiles into Saudi Arabia. He also arranged for to get a Yemeni passport. His cousin was subsequently identified to be one of the S-word bombers in the 1998 US Embassy bombings in Kenya. It was the same year that Nashiri finally joined al-Qaeda, reporting directly to bin Laden. It was nearing the end of the year, 1998. Nashiri planned to attack a US vessel with a boat full of explosives, and bin Laden personally approved of this plan, completely funding it. Nashiri first tried to attack the USS The Civilians as a part of the infamous 2000 Millennium attack plots, but the boat he used for this was way overloaded with explosives and started sinking. His next plan, however, was successful. The USS Cole bombing killed 17 US sailors, injuring several others. He rose up the ranks in al-Qaeda, becoming the chief of operations for the Arabian Peninsula. He organized the Limburg tanker bombing in 2002, a French ship off the coast of Yemen, and has been part of several other attacks. And the CIA had enough. In November 2002, he was captured in Dubai by the CIA, more notably their SAD or Special Activities Division. Once al-Nashri was captured, the CIA used various means of torture to get a confession out of him, specifically waterboarding him. All other forms of torture were redacted from the public record. During his trial, in Nashri's opening statement, he said all the confessions were false, including the French vessel Limburg incident, the USS Cole bombing, the rockets in Saudi Arabia, the plot to bomb American ships in the Persian Gulf, relationships with people committing bombings in Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Laden having a nuclear bomb, and finally a plan to hijack a plane and crash it into a ship. He claimed he faked everything to get out of being tortured, and finally, the true details of his interrogation came to light. They slammed him against the wall, shoved him into a small box, waterboarded him, deprived him of sleeping clothes, and threatened to turn him over to others who would no doubt murder him or torture him, or worse. They would verbally humiliate him and destroy his dignity. He was thrown around between CIA black sites until they finally got what they wanted out of him. Eventually, the charges were dropped, picked up, countersuits were filed, and the case is still ongoing to this day. Abdullah Öcalan. Abdullah Öcalan, also known as Apo, was born in 1949 in southeast Turkey. His mother was Turkish, while his father was Kurdish, a minority that was often looked down upon. He was born to a peasant family in a village, having vague political dreams when he was younger. He tried enlisting in the military but was refused. He claimed it was due to part of his ethnicity. Öcalan enrolled in university where he studied political science. It was here that Öcalan embraced Marxism and voiced left-wing sentiments. He organized several student movements and handed out leftist brochures, but was imprisoned for this. This forced him to then drop out and return to his village in southeastern Turkey, where he began advocating for an independent Kurdish state. By 1977, Öcalan and two comrades wrote a manifesto, the National Road to the Kurdish Revolution, with this being the blueprint for their political party, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or the PKK for short. In 1979, unrest in Turkey forced Öcalan and his associates to flee to Syria, where they began training to form the core of the PKK. It took them 7 years, but in 1984, they began an armed campaign for a Kurdish state by attacking a pro-government village in southeast Turkey. Their operations expanded all across southeast Turkey, including ambushes on military patrols, attacking village guards, bombings in cities. The Turkish state responded with a large-scale counterinsurgency campaign, village evacuations, and widespread human rights abuses. Over 30 to 40,000 people died by the late 1990s, many of them being Kurdish civilians. By this time, Turkey, the US, and the European Union designated the PKK as a terrorist organization, holding Öcalan personally responsible for terrorist attacks, becoming Turkey's most wanted fugitive. But through this, there were attempts at remedying the situation. In 1993, the first ceasefire was announced, but collapsed later that year after the Turkish president was assassinated. Both sides blamed each other, and the hell continued until the mid-1990s, where he went back to his base in Syria, overseeing the movement's political and military structure, all while living safely and comfortably under Syrian protection. This wouldn't last long though, as Turkey threatened Syria with military action if they didn't expel Öcalan, and if they didn't stop supporting the PKK, leading to the 1998 Adana Agreement, where Syria finally kicked him out of the country. He immediately started searching for a new safe haven, practically touring Europe while doing so. He first went to Moscow. A Russian Duma committee initially voted to grant him asylum, but the government didn't want to formally approve it, with Turkey and the US pressuring them not to do so, so he was forced to look somewhere else. Italy was next. Arriving in Rome with a forged passport, the Italian authorities arrested him on an international warrant but placed him on house arrest in a hospital. Turkey requested Italy to extradite him, but Italy refused as the death penalty is in force in Turkey, and Italy was bound by European human rights standards. Rome couldn't find anyone else to take him, so for the next couple months, he was stuck in Italy. They wouldn't let him leave, but they wouldn't extradite him either. Eventually, the diplomatic pressure and lack of a legal framework forced Italy to release him, where he went to Greece. He was sent from Greece to Kenya to escape European scrutiny, where he was arranged to be brought to the Greek embassy in Kenya, the worst possible option. You might recall I mentioned earlier that it was around this time al-Nashri's cousin was identified as an S-word bomber. The bombing was at the US Embassy in Kenya. The country was crawling with US intelligence and special forces. And all this time, the CIA had been waiting to pounce. While he was in Europe, it would have been too risky for them to make a move. He was deep in a legal rabbit hole with way too many countries involved. If anything went wrong, it could destroy US-Europe relations and cause more harm. But when Greece took him in, it gave the US and Turkey an opening to launch their operations. As soon as he landed in Kenya, the Greek embassy was placed under surveillance. His cell phones were tapped, monitoring his conversations with political contacts as he sought asylum. He was abducted in Kenya while on his way from the Greek embassy to the airport in Kenya, an operation carried out by the CIA in the Turkish National Intelligence Organization. His trial was rigged from the start, with many people suspecting heavy CIA involvement and manipulation. His lawyers weren't allowed to meet him, and he wasn't allowed to meet his lawyers. He was interrogated for 10 days without legal counsel, and even the judge took part in his interrogation. Eventually, after a completely unfair legal battle, he was sentenced to death for treason and separatism, also being banned from holding public office for life. His death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, but some argue that's much worse. Carlos the Jackal. Elite Ramirez Sanchez, or better known as Carlos the Jackal, was born on the 12th of October 1949. Carlos was the son of a Marxist lawyer, Jose Altagracia Ramirez Navas. He was named Ilich after Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, a prominent Marxist activist and head of government of Soviet Russia, someone that Carlos's father clearly looked up to. He named his other children Lenin and Vladimir. Considering this, Carlos grew up in a very political environment in Venezuela. He joined the youth movement of the Venezuelan Communist Party and even spent summer camp at Camp Matanzas, a guerrilla warfare school run by the Cuban Intelligence Directorate, basically Cuba's version of the CIA. The same year, his parents divorced. His mother took him to London, where she tried to enroll him to the University of Paris, but eventually he ended up at the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow. At the time, it was considered a notorious hotbed for recruiting foreign communists to the Soviet Union. Put simply, it was a political warfare program. 2 years later, though, in 1970, he was expelled from the university. If you manage to get yourself suspended from a school that's meant to radicalize you and prepare you to serve for the Soviet Union through espionage, sabotage, propaganda, and even assassination, something must be wrong with you. Shortly after being expelled, he volunteered for the Popular Front of the Liberation, or the PFLP, of Palestine, and was sent to a training camp. Once he graduated, he studied at a finishing school, codenamed H4, staffed entirely by Iraqi military near the Syria-Iraq border. And you can slowly see where this is going, being tossed around a political environment, learning and growing under extremely radical political teachings. He was given the name Carlos the Jackal during his time at the PFLP, after a recruiting officer gave him the codename Carlos, considering his South American roots. And he was consistently called the Jackal after The Guardian. The news outlet found a copy of the novel The Day of the Jackal in one of Carlos's old apartments. They then released a headline calling him Carlos the Jackal, and the rest was history. Once he completed guerrilla training, Carlos played an active role for the PFLP in North Jordan during the Black September conflict of 1970. The Black September conflict is often called the Jordanian Civil War and was an armed conflict between the PFLP and the King of Jordan, King Hussein. He built his reputation as a fighter during this conflict and was sent for even further training. Eventually, he left the Middle East and attended the Polytechnic of Central London, now known as the University of Westminster, while still working for the PFLP. 3 years later, in 1973, he carried out his first assassination on Joseph Saif, a Jewish businessman and vice president of the British Zionist Federation. It was on the 30th of December, Carlos called Joseph's home and ordered Joseph's maid to take him to Joseph. Carlos found Joseph in the bathroom, in his bath, and fired one bullet which bounced off Joseph just between his nose and upper lip, knocking Joseph unconscious, but didn't kill him. The Tokarev 7.62mm pistol subsequently jammed, forcing Carlos to flee the scene. The attack was announced as a retaliation for the Mossad's assassination in Paris of Mohammed Boudia, a leader of the PFLP. This was the first of many failures Carlos faced. He also admitted responsibility for a failed bomb attack on the bank Hapo Alim in London. His next attack, however, being the car bomb attacks on 3 French news outlets accused of being pro-Israel. He also claimed to be the grenade thrower at a French restaurant, which ended up killing 2 people and injuring 30. This was a part of the 1974 French embassy attack in The Hague, which took place in the Netherlands. He also took part in 2 failed rocket-propelled grenade attacks on Israeli aeroplanes at the Orly airport near Paris in January 1975. The second attack led to a gunfight with the police at the airport and a 17-hour hostage standoff. It involved hundreds of riot police and the French Interior Minister. Carlos fled during the gunfights, while the other PFLP terrorists were allowed to Baghdad, Iraq. By now, government agencies internationally were starting to take notice, including the FBI and the CIA. In June 1975, one of Carlos's contacts were captured, Michel Mourkab, being interrogated by French intelligence. He told the agents that during a Parisian house party, 2 unarmed agents began interrogating Carlos, where he shot and killed them, escaping to Beirut. This catapulted Carlos to the top of the French and international wanted lists. In Beirut, he planned out the attack on the headquarters of OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, in Vienna. On the 21st of December 1975, a 6-person team was led by Carlos, which attacked a meeting which had all the major OPEC leaders present. More than 60 hostages were taken, with 3 being killed: an Austrian policeman, an Iraqi OPEC employee, and a member of the Libyan delegation. Carlos's demands: Austrian authorities read a communique about the Palestinian cause on Austrian radio and television networks every 2 hours, to avoid the threatened execution of a hostage every 15 minutes. The Austrian government agreed, and the communique was broadcasted as demanded. A day later, on the 22nd of December, the government provided PFLP and 42 hostages an airplane, which took them to Algeria, Libya, and back to Algeria, where many terrorists were granted asylum and hostages were freed. Soon after, however, a fellow PFLP agent accused Carlos of having received a large sum of money, somewhere around $20 million to $50 million, for the release of Arab hostages. Carlos claimed that it was the money paid by the Saudis on behalf of the Iranians and was diverted en route and lost by the revolution. Carlos then left Algeria and attended a meeting of senior PFLP officials to justify his failure in executing 2 senior OPEC hostages, them being the finance minister of Iran and the oil minister of Saudi Arabia. They eventually decided that he failed the mission and expelled him. A bounty was then put on his head, with 4 men traveling to Tehran in 1976 to kill Carlos, but it was never revealed what happened in those meetings. Not long after, Carlos attempted to build his own independent network, called the Organization of Ahmed Arab Struggle, but this didn't last long. Years passed as he tried and failed to set up his organization, which resulted in the Syrian government forcing to expel him. He searched for over 2 years, trying to find a country where he could seek asylum, when he settled in Sudan. But by this time, enough was enough. In 1993, CIA contractor Billy Waugh was tasked with finding Carlos and arresting him. They searched for 4 months, managing to identify a man who was working as a bodyguard for Carlos, and watched him until the bodyguard led them to Carlos's apartment on the 8th of February, 1994. They established an observation post in an abandoned hospital across the street and watched him for another 4 months, eventually handing their intel to French intelligence. French intelligence offered the Sudanese government tons of communication equipment and supplied them with satellite pictures of everything they needed. The Sudanese foreign minister was invited to Paris to negotiate the extradition of Carlos, but he was adamant that his culture forbade him from giving up a guest in his country. But eventually, they convinced him. All it took to give up Carlos was the promise of World Bank and IMF aid to help ease their foreign debt, as well as videos and photos of Carlos partying, drinking, and being intimate with women, which offended their Muslim faith. In the eyes of the foreign minister, Carlos turned from a combatant, someone who fought for the Palestinian cause, to a hoodlum. His trial stretched on until the 23rd of December 1997, where he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and later 2 more life sentences were added. Through the years, Carlos has continuously voiced his support for Osama bin Laden and his attacks on the United States. Pablo Escobar. He's one of the most infamous drug lords out there. While the world frowns upon him, the streets of Medellin cheer his name. Born on the 1st of December in Rio Negro, Colombia, Pablo Escobar was dealt a rough hand, being born in poverty among 6 other siblings. He struggled hard. Life wasn't easy for him on the streets, with him leaving to be with his cousin when he was just 17. Coming back a couple years later, he decided to start the first of many criminal activities, just to make some money, creating and selling fake high school diplomas. Unknowing to him, this would be the first of many illegal activities he'd carry out. He dropped out not long after, continuing to sell even more butcher diplomas now that he was out of high school, with this being the small start to what ended up being one of the world's most illegal industries to date. After high school, Escobar didn't give up on his education just yet. He went to college. His goals set to be a criminal lawyer, a politician, and eventually El Presidente. His goals were ambitious, but he worked hard. Sadly, that wasn't enough. As hard as he worked, he was forced to drop out because of his poverty. He couldn't pay for his education, marking the beginning of his criminal career. Not being able to put food on the table and knowing no other way to make ends meet other than all of the illegal happenings he'd been exposed to ever since he was a kid, Escobar began his illegal activities almost immediately after dropping out of the Universidad Autónoma Latinoamericana and started a wide range of criminal activities. Starting small, Escobar sold illegal cigarettes and fake lottery tickets. He took tombstones, sandblasted their inscriptions, and resold them. Compared to his more well-known drug empire, this was pretty tame. However, his way of life turned from a life of harmless crime to violent acts pretty quickly. Soon enough, Escobar knew his way around the streets and started joining gangs to steal cars off the road. They went around in gangs and groups to commit motor vehicle theft, but his connections and actions raised him up in the food chain. Controlling these gangs, his crimes became more violent, employing criminals. He sent them to kidnap various people who owned him and demanded ransoms. Escobar's gang started becoming notorious for kidnapping and demanding ransoms from people, but their name and reputation was very well known after kidnapping and killing Diego Echeverria, a famous local businessman. The family of Diego paid Escobar $50,000, putting his and his gang's name on the map. For about a decade now, Escobar was smooth sailing. With him being involved in leading organized crime for this long, nothing seemed like it could go wrong. Until it did. At this point in time, around 1975, booger sugar trade was on the rise. Escobar saw this and thought nothing of it, jumping on the train, trafficking booger sugar throughout South America. But he was rising and growing too fast. Colombian authorities finally caught wind of his activities and caught him trafficking almost 40 kilograms of booger sugar in his spare tire through Ecuador. Things were over. He was arrested in May 1976, returning from Ecuador. However, things didn't quite play out in the way the Colombian Security Services, or DAS, thought it would. After getting the first judge removed from the lawsuit, he bribed the second judge for a verdict in his favor, and he and all the other prisoners involved were let go. Simple as that. This is when he learned the power that money holds. He bribed tons of officials and politicians to gain more and more power and control, giving them the carrot or the stick, or as he put it, silver or lead. It was as simple as you accept the bribes, you get paid. If you reject them, you get assassinated. This was his intimidation method. With money, he could do anything. Nobody could stand in his way. If they did, they'd either move aside for the cash or he'd force them to. Soon he realized the true potential he held, so he put his plan into motion. Bribing several Colombian politicians, he had them in his pocket, both conservative and liberal parties. His goal wasn't power, yet it was self-preservation, safety, and ensuring the law wouldn't be an issue to him ever again. Finally, every politician he had in his pocket was elected, giving him access to almost every level of the Colombian government, pulling strings like he was playing puppets. In fact, he was doing just that. Now that he had taken care of the authorities, it was time for him to get moving on the ever-increasing booger sugar trade, unknowing to Escobar would be one of the final nails in the coffin for him. In April 1978, he met with drug lords, speaking with them about what was most likely trafficking booger sugar. This was later confirmed when around 19,000 kilograms, or 190 tons of booger sugar, entered U.S. soil and territory. And from here on out, it was exponential growth. Demand for booger sugar in the United States was higher than ever, so naturally, Escobar did what he had to do with the supply. After the first trade of 190 tons, the Medellin cartel expanded rapidly. More shipments were used for smuggling, more routes were created, and more main entry points into the U.S. were formed in California, South Florida, and Puerto Rico, with other parts of the country being used as well. Later, Escobar and his cartel co-founder Carlos Leher worked on a new transshipment point on an island in the Bahamas known as Norman's Cay. It was about 220 miles southeast from the coast of Florida. However, Escobar never bought this island. Leher had it as his own solo venture, while Escobar transformed it into a paradise for both luxury and trafficking booger sugar into the United States. Escobar bought most of the land on the island, which had a 1-kilometer airstrip constructed, a harbor, hotels, houses, boats, aircrafts, and a massive refrigerated warehouse to store, well, guess what? Booger sugar. For the next 4 years, this was the route mainly used by the Medellin cartel. It was efficient and got the job done right. It generated hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, which he used to buy over 20 square kilometers of land in Antigua to build his hacienda. This mansion had a zoo, a private lake, a sculpture garden, and tons of other amenities for his family and members of the cartel to enjoy. This was the height of his wealth, controlling 80% of the global booger sugar supply from mainly that single island, raking in hundreds of millions in net profit every single week. He was a billionaire. Compared to today, he would be in the top 25 richest people in the world. The wealth he gained from his drug trade had made him unstoppable. With almost infinite resources, he could accomplish anything, even doing the government's job for them. The power he held over one of the strongest world governments and even puppeteering his own government is something completely unprecedented and something that will most likely never be able to happen again. As far as he had come, he didn't forget his roots. He financed the development of several Medellin's poverty-stricken neighborhoods and built housing, schools, hospitals, churches, and football stadiums. In 1980, he joined politics, something he had been dreaming for since high school. He was involved and supported in the formation of the Liberal Party of Colombia, and 2 years later ended up getting into the Colombian Congress. This was not a plan or a ploy for his cartel or drug empire. Escobar knew he had to do right by his people and wanted to make real changes to his homeland. He was granted parliamentary immunity and the right to a diplomatic passport, and was very well known for all of his charities and his philanthropic nature. The public loved him. He felt like a king, and he might as well have been one. He was in the perfect position he'd been dreaming of since day one. Nothing could stop him now. Everything was smooth sailing from here on out, or so he thought. But his entry into politics would be cut short from day one, when the Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, had accused him of illegal activities on his first day in Congress. Things were looking bad for Escobar, as the subordinates of Lara Bonilla started investigating his arrest for the 39 kilos of booger sugar smuggled and trafficked in from Ecuador. And only a couple months after the investigation started, the Liberal Party leader expelled him from the party. Escobar fought back, denying the accusations, but to no result. He announced his retirement from politics just 4 years after he had started in January of 1984. Lara Bonilla was assassinated 3 months later. Escobar was wanted, and while bribing and murdering worked everywhere else, he couldn't get his control over the Colombian judiciary. In the fall of '85, bribing and murdering several judges, Escobar requested the government for a conditional surrender, where he wouldn't be extradited to the United States. This was denied at first. However, after forming an organization known as the Los Extraditable Organization, he created to fight the extradition policy in Colombia. Near the end of '86, the policy was declared illegal, as being signed by a presidential delegation, not the president himself. Since the president at the time did not sign it himself, the policy was declared illegal and Escobar had won over the judiciary. However, soon enough, the new president had put the decision on review, with his victory being short-lived at best. However, Escobar had moved past that, still holding a grudge against the Liberal Party leader, to which he had him assassinated for kicking him out of the party and politics as a whole. But that wasn't the end. He wanted to cripple the party. The leader's next in line was scheduled for a flight on 18th of August 1989, on which a bomb was planted. Avincia Flight 203 was destroyed, with all 107 people on board dying, except for one man, the successor to the Liberal Party leader, who survived as he had missed the plane. His life was intact, but only by chance and luck. Escobar had murdered 107 innocent people, among which were 2 American nationals. And this is when the American government had decided to intervene directly. After this tragedy, the president's administration at the time moved against Escobar and associated drug cartels. After negotiations with the government, Escobar agreed to surrender and cease all criminal activity in exchange for a reduced sentence and preferential treatment. Escobar gave himself up to authorities in 1991, and with the new constitution passed the same year, he was not extradited to the US. While the act was highly controversial at the time due to people speculating whether Escobar, along with several other drug lords with power within the government, had forced their hand, Escobar was relaxing in his own luxurious private prison, which was better than most people's homes. Serving time in La Catedral, he had a football pitch, a giant dollhouse, a bar, a jacuzzi, and even an entire waterfall. However, reports that he kept his criminal enterprise going were surfacing. Public outcry started to pile up. And because of this, the Colombian government was forced to move Escobar into a traditional prison, one with bars on the cells and metal trays for food. But Escobar knew what was coming, and being prepared for this was an understatement. Pablo Escobar proceeded to make one of the greatest prison escapes ever known to man, even to this day. When special forces raided the prison, he held 2 VIPs who came along as hostages, then shut off the power. The army was in the dark, unable to shoot or see. For 12 hours, they remained in the prison, while Escobar had escaped ages ago into the forest, humiliating the government. And from here on out, he was on the run. Wanted by the Colombian government, the United States government, and under siege from a rival cartel, everywhere Escobar turned was an enemy. All this while, however, the CIA was at just as big as a loss as Escobar. They'd spent hundreds of millions of dollars on finding him, and now they're cooperating with 2 different militaries, as well as an entirely separate special task force created with the sole purpose of finding and capturing or killing Escobar. Search Block was an ad hoc special operations unit of the National Police of Colombia. It had over 600 members trained by the United States and Colombian Army, a special task force designated to locate and disassemble cartels and their leaders. They were heavily assisted by the CIA in triangulating his position, tapping radio and phone calls, feeding intel to the Search Block. resorting to desperate measures at certain times, hiding in tents, burning millions of dollars in cash to stay warm. Escobar was still a notorious daredevil, as while the entirety of the United States of America were looking for him in a nationwide manhunt, he posed in front of the White House with his son. However, finally, in December 1993, he was found in a middle-class home in suburban Medellin by Colombian authorities with the help of the intel the CIA gave them, where a shootout started between Escobar and the CIA Special Forces. He was trapped, cornered, and for once he'd been outsmarted and outgunned. Survival was the only objective for him at that point. He had to do something. He couldn't just let it all go. He refused to give it up. He had to escape. And then he saw his one chance. Using the last of his strength, he tried to get up on the roof, but it was too late. Escobar was shot and died, almost as soon as he trampled onto the roof. His death and funeral was widespread news, with over 25,000 people attending his funeral, simply due to the impact he made on his people with all his positive changes to the nation, despite his nefarious crimes. This ended the chapter of the world's most dangerous and powerful drug lords. Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, one of history's most notorious terrorists and criminals of all time. Everyone knows just how nefarious he was. He needs no introduction. Instead, I'm going to directly jump into how the CIA killed him, one of their hardest targets to find and kill ever. But before doing that, here's a long laundry list of his acts. He played a key and important role in the Soviet-Afghan War. He was alleged to be involved in the 1988 Gilgit massacre. He created Al-Qaeda, one of the world's worst terrorist organizations ever, was part of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in the Gulf War, was expelled from Saudi Arabia, declared war on America, directed hundreds of terrorist attacks globally, did 9/11, and that was the trigger for the CIA. They began sending troops to Afghanistan to interrogate the Taliban and capture Al-Qaeda operatives. The Special Activities Division was leading the investigation, and the target was clear. Osama bin Laden was wanted, captured, or killed. By 2005, it was made clear that bin Laden was in Pakistan, so they began capturing more and more operatives. Their goal was to find people who had information on top Al-Qaeda leadership, those who could give up someone who was close to bin Laden. And just when they thought they were getting closer, bin Laden would release time-sensitive videos confirming his survival, almost taunting the CIA. It was an unstoppable force against an immovable object. The CIA was tasked with using any means necessary. Hundreds, if not thousands, of CIA black sites were used all over the world to torture and interrogate Al-Qaeda operatives. They would leave these people without food or water for days, stringing their life along hours at a time, manipulating them physically and mentally. The CIA soon realized the focus of the investigation was to be centered on couriers for Al-Qaeda, seen as these couriers were the ones who would provide communications for bin Laden. In 2002, interrogators had heard about an Al-Qaeda courier who was part of the inner circle, and this courier led the CIA directly to Osama bin Laden. Eventually, bin Laden was traced to a mansion near the border of Pakistan, and this is where they conducted an extremely risky operation. The intel was not 100% accurate, and the mansion was nothing short of a fortress. On May 2nd, 2011, the United States conducted Operation Neptune Spear. Personally approved by Barack Obama, 24 Navy SEALs and 2 Black Hawks took flight to Jalalabad, an Afghan city over 120 miles away. The compound stuck out like a sore thumb to the houses nearby, had a huge wall running across the perimeter, with designs being perfect to hide itself from satellites and any other surveillance. It had no internet, no landline, all garbage was burned, and nobody was let inside. The CIA tried several times, sending in operatives under disguise to try and confirm bin Laden's presence, but failed in all attempts. It was a strong lead. It wasn't surefire, but it was all they had. This is what 10.5 years of investigation from one of the world's most dangerous and powerful intelligence agencies had come up with. Navy SEAL Team 6 infiltrated the compound, cleared it of all residents, before finally Osama bin Laden was shot and killed. They cleared out the house, taking as much evidence as possible, and exfiltrated. And alright guys, that wraps up the CIA's Most Wanted Explained. I'm sorry this video wasn't like the FBI top 10. The only issue is the CIA doesn't keep a top 10. They are, by no surprise, super secretive about everything. So yeah, this was the most famous cases of the most wanted people by the CIA, and I thought it was a unique video. I haven't seen it on YouTube yet, so I hope you enjoyed. And if you'd like to see an FBI Most Wanted Explained, comment down below. Maybe I'll make one of these every single year and cover some new people that came out from the CIA. I don't know, it could be interesting. Just comment down below if you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means the world. And listen to me on Spotify. Join the Patreon for early access, and thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all, and this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Reddit is a place built around communities. Millions of people gather every day to talk about movies, video games, sports, and just about every hobby imaginable. But not all communities are built around harmless hobbies or interests. Some are built for predators looking for sympathy, and other corners of the website become a last resort for people desperately begging strangers to help them when no one else will listen. The deeper you go into Reddit, the more you realize that some of its communities aren't just strange, they're horrifying. Today, we're diving into some horrifying corners of Reddit, and viewer discretion is advised. This one gets disturbing. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. r/convicted individual support. And that's not the name of the subreddit, but it's S offender support. I just can't say it, but you get what I'm saying, and let's get into it. Reddit can be a dangerous place for someone to share their thoughts, feelings, and even opinions. Look at places like r/politics or r/am I the asshole, or really any subreddit, and you'll find hundreds of heated arguments. One post can lead to users berating each other, name calling, and so far as judging one another's character. It's like once someone types in Reddit on their web browser, they feel no need to hold back anymore. But I recently came across one community that by far is the most insane. It's one called r/offender support. It's for people who have been convicted of predatory offenses that landed them on the registry for those such crimes. To keep it simple for the rest of the story, I'll refer to them as convicted individuals. The first thing that you may be thinking is that it seems insane. It sounds like a bunch of people who have done awful things and want somewhere they can complain about their consequences. And honestly, that was also my first thought. One of the first things I come across is a pinned post by one of the moderators that gives an introduction to what exactly the subreddit is, and more importantly, what its purpose is. The post is titled, "For the Curious, the Lurkers, and the Trolls." The post is pretty long, but the gist is in the goals they list, which are: number 1, to offer support in navigating being on the registry; number 2, to listen. It is never okay to minimize or excuse having committed a crime that harmed another person. It is not tolerated here. But we do understand that the road to rebuilding your life after having served your time for an offense is often made virtually impossible to do so. Number 3, to share and provide information about how to find housing and employment. Number 4, to try to answer questions about the multitude of ever-changing laws and rules surrounding registry restrictions. Number 5, to provide resources that will lower the chance of reconviction. Number 6, we will not offer legal advice, but can sometimes explain certain legal processes that are confusing. Number 7, to offer support and encouragement for spouses and family members who are trying to navigate this system with a loved one. Number 8, to share information in the hope that it will help others avoid committing a crime. And number 8, to promote change and healing. So far, it feels reassuring that it doesn't seem like the group's members have intentions of bypassing the severity of their crimes that they're talking about. But then I read more of the post. It says, "Now you read all of that. And if you still feel the need to come here and tell a woman she deserves to be violently hurt and graphically describe horrible things you want to happen to her children because she loves someone who got a BJ from his younger girlfriend in the backseat of his car the day after he turned 17 when he was in high school 15 years ago, or you want to tell an autistic 20-year-old who got caught in something predatory that he was confused by to begin with to go commit S-word himself, then go for it. Get it all out of your system. Then look in the mirror. See that? That person is a monster. For everyone else, welcome. We're here for you. And actually, you know what? Trolls, we're here for you too. Because you wouldn't be here spewing violence and hate if you were okay." Now that feels harsh. I mean, this subreddit is dedicated to talking about people who committed some of the most serious and heinous crimes someone can commit. So it feels a little hypocritical to call an innocent outsider a monster when you yourself are one. Of course, it's not okay to send death threats like the ones they mentioned, but that rant gives the impression that they treat all of these convicted individuals like they accidentally walked onto the registry or something. And any assumption that maybe most of them are actually just guilty is criticism that they chalk up to harassment and bullying. But it's not just this one moderator. It looks to be a running theme. There's some debate on it, but many others feel similar. One user asked this question: how many people are actually offenders? And many replies are pretty surprising, to say the least. If everyone were caught for everything they have done, especially as teenagers, and considering the breadth of the criminal law, I would wager most everyone would be a convicted individual of some stripe. I would argue most people have committed some sort of offense in their lifetime. I'm not saying everyone is a perv, but how many men do you know that have dated a significantly younger woman or went to the bathroom in public? These, among others, don't really answer the OP's question. Rather, they just take it and use it as somewhere they can put their frustrations about the system. And the amount that these types of comments are repeated is honestly concerning. Because in reality, statistics show that the type of cases they are talking about are much more of a minority than they are letting on. The United States Sentencing Committee states that 98% of people were convicted for terrible, violent, and disgusting crimes, most of which I cannot name here. Only 2% was because of something other than that, like maybe, quote, using the bathroom in public. Which does not give the impression that everybody would be a convicted individual, but that actually most people are rightfully placed on that list because they're downright dangerous. But let's take a look at some of the users on here to see if they should or shouldn't be placed in that category. This is one post from November of 2025. First time post, part of my story. It reads, I wrote a lot before mentioning it and don't know where to put it, but I'm 21, turning 22 soon. I guess I should start with my childhood, I'm not sure. I think this started when I was introduced to adult content in the 4th grade. I wasn't necessarily attracted to it, but as I got older, around mid-teenage years, I became severely depressed. I attribute this to my household growing up. Very chaotic, and it called for me to be constantly hypervigilant. Extremely stressful. Anyways, I guess that's really when it started. Eventually, I tried to emulate some things I saw in videos, which probably forced some warped connection / lack of boundaries. risky behavior, close calls, and I never learned or cared to. Depression has never left me. It's only gotten worse, and I've only grown more comfortable with it. Adult content, aside from cannabis, was a coping mechanism. The guilt, shame, fear, and embarrassment that came from these acts just made it worse. It's creating a terrible cycle of shame, pleasure, and shame. Along with my depression, I'd say I only became more depraved. I'll skip to it now, where I'm being charged with indecent exposure because I was taking pictures of women and periodically, confusing maybe, exposing myself in a Walmart of all places. Both things I picked up from adult content. I guess I should say that it wasn't my intention to flash anyone. I honestly don't believe I did. Walmart theft prevention probably made the call. Apparently there's footage. I spent the rest of that day in jail. I have my second court date on the 17th where I think I will take my plea. To pick up where I left off, I think one of the worst parts is the confusion of my guilt. Is it just because I've been caught? Or am I actually remorseful? I hope it's the former. But the most painful and the biggest source of my shame is the people in my life I'm going to disappoint. The people I love the most. I feel like a monster. Not like it's new. That's part of the deep shame I feel. But it's the center of my attention. All the times I numb myself to stomach what I'm capable of is catching up to me. I feel unredeemable, condemned. My education, future career, love life, and life in general is all at risk, and I feel trapped. I'm terrified, so helpless and utterly hopeless. I want to wake up from this nightmare. And this user got one thing right. He needs help, but what he did is nowhere near excusable. Whether or not he's remorseful, which he's not even sure about, is besides the point. These crimes were not victimless. There were women involved who will likely be scarred forever. They are not walking away unscathed. So sure, the registry creates problems. This user will have a hard time finding a job, dating, and gaining his family's trust back. These are just called consequences. It's what happens when someone does something bad, something that hurts other people. And even though moderators seem to want everyone to give these users the benefit of the doubt, it's a little hard to in a situation like this. Who accidentally stumbles into a Walmart and gets naked in the bread aisle? That's widely known as a pretty disgusting thing to do, and people who think they can get away with it should also get in trouble for it. But other users don't really care to get OP to take any accountability because they all feel the same way. And it's not just people that have been convicted themselves. There are family members on here as well. Someone posts, admission of guilt. Is it possible for an admission of guilt to not be used in a trial somehow? My husband was high the night he was arrested and taken into custody and questioned. He was scared and thought his best option was to essentially say, yeah, sure, whatever, I did it. Because he wasn't trying to get locked up for years upon years. He didn't realize at the time what he was facing. Now it's all coming back to bite him. His public defender says there is no legal leg to stand to file a motion to exclude his admission, but they could argue it to a jury. His issue is he doesn't trust a jury. The only evidence is testimony. An expert on the subject and his statements to police. No eyewitnesses, no physical evidence, nothing. Edit to add, my husband was questioned for a while, unsure exactly how long, denying the entire time, but ultimately he felt like he had no other choice. He knew they weren't going to give up and that no one would believe him. He knows what he did by admitting was stupid. It's like they're desperate for help for all the wrong reasons. Because in the comments, she explains that it's not like her husband admitted to something like peeing in public, but actually, it was for exploiting an ex-girlfriend's kid. Instead of taking into consideration the weight of an accusation like that, she says that because he was using cannabis, he mistakenly admitted it. What she hasn't considered is that maybe it just actually happened. And maybe we should be focused on getting help for the victim. And with things like these, it feels obvious that they should be convicted. The public has a right to know which people around them have done horrific things like this, to give the public an opportunity to stay away from offenders. But even still, the general consensus here is that there should not be a public registry, even with a case of a genuine predator. A man by the name of Matteo Condalucci became a convicted individual after he'd done unspeakable things to his daughter for years and years. But what are users on this subreddit most concerned about? The fact that he was murdered by someone named James Fairbanks, a resident of Omaha, who had stumbled upon Matteo when searching the registry of an area he was planning on moving to. He fell into a rabbit hole of researching him and what he had done, even going as far as passing the offender's house. And when doing so, James described him as, quote, pretending to wash his truck while staring at a group of kids playing in the street. James had also noticed a playground in the offender's backyard, and with all of the details put together, it was too much for him to bear. He became obsessed with him. He couldn't eat or sleep. He couldn't think about anything else other than who Matteo may hurt next. James said, quote, I couldn't, in good condition, allow him to do it to anyone else while I had the means to stop him. Which led to a post on the convicted individual subreddit titled, This is terrifying. People wonder why we don't want public registries. And it's filled with comments like, quote, this angers and disgusts me that something like this has happened and how casual he is about committing murder. I hope he gets the death penalty. No remorse. First damn comment, it's about a defense fund. We are the only country that I know of that has a public registry. All others that have registries are only available to the police officers. The best thing we can do as a country, if we still need a registry, is to have them only available to police officers and no housing restrictions. The housing restrictions don't do anything, or they make things worse. So the murderer of someone as evil, predatory, and dangerous as Matteo Condalucci should die, but they're acting as if the monster himself is innocent. Make it make sense. Cases like Matteo are honestly the perfect examples of why there should be public registries. What about all of his neighbors who have kids that might play near his house? What if he comes across as the sweet old man across the street and no one thinks anything of his friendliness until it's too late? I'm not saying he should be murdered, but I think it's absurd to say his crimes should be hidden. And of course, not all convicted individuals are like this. There are plenty of posts on here that showcase examples of people that haven't committed something so egregious, or users that started behaving in ways when they were young and never got the help they need, and the shame and guilt they feel is just crippling. But that doesn't take away from the culture on this subreddit, which is honestly pretty disgusting. It's one thing to want change, to want a system that better helps people, that prevents terrible things from happening instead of just punishing people and giving them no chance of rehabilitation. But to ask to have the whole registry removed feels gross and predatory in itself. To demand something like that just feels so minimizing to the victims of such horrendous crimes like the ones of Matteo. Because ultimately, they are the most important person in all of this. They have been harmed the most. And whether the registry should be removed or made private is irrelevant until the day that we figure out how to prevent the crimes, the hurt, and all of that harm from happening in the first place. And this subreddit truly ranks among some of the top, most disturbing, disgusting, and just downright horrifying subreddits I have ever gone through. Daryl Pratt. In November of 2015, the video game industry was met with a new force. IGN, one of the leading media outlets for all video game news, hired a brand new writer, Alana Pierce. Alana is from Queensland, Australia, where she began her journalism career in 2012. She worked for a couple of small companies, as well as news and TV stations, until deciding to relocate in 2015. It was around this time that her career really started to take off. It was also at this point that she started to create content on YouTube, and as time went on, she gained more followers. More people were interested in what she had to say, and people became dedicated fans. This can be seen across her multiple channels, social media accounts, and even a subreddit dedicated to her, r/Alana Pierce. Users post interviews, updates, and discussions about her work. It's pretty normal stuff, which is why, when one post seems a little off, it becomes very noticeable. Which is exactly what happened on June 25th, 2019, when a user by the name of Daryl Pratt made a post that just said, "What's up, boo?" That's it. No other context, no pictures, no video, no other comments. It's very out of place for the subreddit. No other users make any post remotely like that on this page. And that isn't the only post made by the user on r/Alana Pierce. There's one more from the same day, just 2 hours earlier. All this one says is, "Hey." It's just odd. But what becomes concerning are the comments. How are you not banned at this point? So, you're back, huh? I hope you're doing better, man. And good to know you're alive. And at this point, I hope you're just joking and not actually obsessed with her again. These users are commenting on the end of a long and treacherous road that Daryl Pratt has gone down. These last two posts were the last anyone ever heard from him, but it was an exhausting journey to get there. So let's start at the beginning. The first time Alana Pierce got unwelcome attention from the internet was shortly after she began a relationship with voice actor Blaine Gibson. As she was living her life and continuing with her normal content, she received this comment on one of her YouTube videos. "Wow, what a surprise. She has a boyfriend? But for real, what is it with the females and their need to constantly be in a relationship? Like, why can't they be single for at least a month? I watched all your videos since the beginning. I hope I can meet you one day and we could have something great, but no, you had to go and settle with that first douchebag that walked in front of you. I bet he doesn't even tell you how beautiful and freaking hot you are every day. I bet he didn't even care about you until you opened up to him. I'm so tired of every single woman I like having a relationship. That's it. I'm so done." This comment got popular on r/Nice Guys for good reason. Clearly, someone can't get a girlfriend. And Alana just replied back, "I was single for over 2 years before dating Blaine." But nice guys don't stop. And as a woman in the public eye, Alana continued to get these kinds of comments, specifically from one account under the name of Bruce Wayne. He used a picture of a penguin for the profile picture, and over time, Alana started to see these penguins everywhere. He was not one of a kind. She had these types of fans often. People that would leave tons of comments and send messages that were just too much. Usually nice, but over the top. And the more they came in, the more overwhelmed she would get. Her approach in the past would be to politely ask them to stop. Not that they had to stop watching her videos, but to cool it a little, which is completely reasonable. But every time she would do that, they would freak out. The rejection shattered their ego, and with that kind of blow, they became angry. Now, they hated her. They dedicated their entire account to trying to ruin her career. The comments would switch from praise to criticism. Her every move was still being watched, but now from an enemy instead of a fan. So, with someone like Bruce Wayne, Alana wanted to try something different. She started to slowly block him on different social media accounts, depending on which ones he was most active on. But this gentle approach quickly came to a halt after she got some work done on her eyebrows, something called microblading. Just a simple cosmetic thing that tons of women do every day. But Bruce Wayne, he hated it.
But he ended up going on IGN videos, which is the company that I work for, and if people would say something nice about me, he would reply to them and be like, she got her eyebrows tattooed. Basically, he was incredibly angry that someone he had put on an unrealistic pedestal had done something to themselves that he didn't like. And that was the point where I was
This
like,
was the beginning of Daryl Pratt. The first post ever made to his Reddit account is titled, "Can I get in trouble for sending a girl love letters?" Unfortunately, this post was removed by Redditors and I'm not able to find it archived anywhere else, but I can get a good idea of how insane this post was just from the comments alone. Someone says, "It may not be illegal by the letter of the law, but it's not really okay. You should stop. You were blocked on social media. That's an indication that this woman does not want to have contact with you. Even though you said nice things, she doesn't want those comments. She likely finds you weird and creepy. I would strongly recommend that you stop sending letters, stop contacting her, and seek professional help. You probably would get a restraining order or no contact order if you continue. Not a lawyer, not legal advice." And this is fantastic advice, but Daryl Pratt does not listen. He instead replies with, "I didn't know she didn't want those comments. She banned me without even a warning. I just wanted her to know how amazing she is. I would do anything just to be friends with her online. I like sending her letters just so she knows how cool she is. I don't see why this is wrong." And users are now hoping that this is just a troll. Someone who saw what happened with Alana and is playing a prank. Because otherwise, this person is teetering on the edge of danger. Which, from his next couple of comments, he seems to be leaning in one direction. And it's not the one any of us, or especially Alana, want to see. He says, "Thanks for the advice, but I think I'm going to keep sending letters for now. If she tells me to stop, I'll stop, of course. The guy in the movie The Notebook sent like 365 letters to that girl. I feel like if I send them for long enough, she will realize how much I care about her, and maybe she'll be friends with me then. I'm not a troll. I've been following her on social media for over a year, before she even worked at IGN. I've invested a lot of my feelings into her, and now she blocks me. I want her to like me so bad and don't know what else to do. I mean, I don't know how else to make her like me. I thought about making a new account with a different name and following her with that one and pretend to be someone else and hopefully leave comments that she will like. But I would much rather her like me, not a fake account." He just doesn't stop. He makes another post asking again if making multiple accounts will get him in trouble, instead of listening to any of the comments telling him why and how he should get help. About a month passes, and there's no word from Daryl. But also, for him, still no communication with Alana. Each day that passes is agony for him. He's heartbroken, lost, confused. So he makes another post, hoping this time someone will give him the answer he's looking for. Me, 18 male, need help making up with my friend, 21 female. I haven't talked to her in about 3 weeks. It's truly baffling, and in some ways, very sad, how much this person believes that he and Alana have some kind of relationship. At one point, he says that he lives in Kentucky and she lives in California, so they'll probably never meet. But that doesn't stop his delusions. In his mind, they're best friends. His comments to her are them talking, and her blocking him is like a breakup. He's grieving the loss of her, which still is not her problem. None of this. No matter what he is struggling with or what led him to behave like this, Alana doesn't deserve all this harassment while she's just trying to work. But I don't know that Daryl ever saw it that way. He was only ever focused on his pain, on how this affected him. Meanwhile, he was flipping Alana's life upside down.
He sent letters to my workplace. He also said that he was planning to call the front desk at IGN and have them transfer to me to the phone on my desk, so we got rid of the phone on my desk, so that wasn't an option. And there was also a threat regarding E3 that year in 2016, so I had 2 just giant, terrifying looking security guards walking around with me for the entirety of last year's E3, just to make sure that nothing weird happened. So
But these things didn't matter to him. The only thing that eventually got him to back off was when users told him that Alana had a boyfriend, which she did. They weren't lying. And Daryl did not take this well. It was like his whole world came crashing down. His dreams, his hopes, everything he had worked towards was crushed. Honestly, it's pretty surprising that he gave up when finding this out. Given his history, he seems like the kind of person who would have persisted. And he did, in a way. Just not directly. Instead of sending countless letters and begging her, he moved to a different tactic: manipulation. He made her feel like his life was in her hands. These comments have since been deleted, but Alana shared them in her video.
Humiliating for me. So then amidst all of this stuff about me having a boyfriend, he said, "How would you feel if your girlfriend found someone else she likes more than you? That's how I feel." And then the last 2 comments are, "I'll most likely be dead tonight, so that should make her extremely happy, and then fuck this world." And then he didn't use the account again.
She was rightfully extremely upset. Not only had she been thrown through the ringer the last couple of months, watching her back and fearing for her life constantly, but now she felt the weight of someone's life on her shoulders. She mentions in her video that she understands where this mentality comes from. Like Daryl mentioned in his comment about The Notebook. So many shows and movies have characters that chase endlessly after women, no matter how far they run, but by the end of the story, they end up getting married and living happily ever after. But that's not how real life works. But Alana suspects that's where Daryl learned that behaving like this is not only okay, but the way to win her heart. When really, it just tormented her and left her distraught. She has no idea what happened to him after those comments. She thinks that he has made a few other accounts where he continues to talk to her, but nothing has ever been that intense again where she feels like she needs to put up a boundary again. Of course, I don't hope that he was being truthful in his last comments and actually died that night. I hope that he finally came to his senses and got the help he needs. And I do hope that was the end of it all. Even if Alana stopped getting harassed, it's possible he moved on to another woman and stalked them instead. People have found a few accounts that they suspect is him, but nothing is proven, and either way, No other profile has caused as much trouble as Daryl Pratt has. And hopefully, it stays that way. Internet user 1998. One of the most entertaining subreddits on Reddit is one called r/whatisthisthing. With almost 3 million weekly visitors, there's tons of users every day who post pictures of random or obscure looking objects that everyone investigates. Each post is like a puzzle, and it's a race to see who figures it out first. It's usually something wholesome or just not that exciting. In fact, it's even pretty anticlimactic sometimes. Someone comes in anxious and worried that some small device or substance found in their teenager's room is a drug, and that their child is in extreme danger, and the comments then reassure them it's nothing, and everyone moves on with their day. So when something pops up that actually looks concerning, people stop. They really investigate, looking into every possible explanation, hoping it's not what they think. One post made on July 12, 2017 by internet user 1998 became one of these. It became so serious that the moderators actually removed the post because they felt like the OP needed to get actual help from law enforcement and not from other Redditors. The title of the post reads, "I think I'm being watched. Is this a camera?" And I wish we could see the picture that was attached, but like I said, it was removed. But the users that did see it not only confirmed that it is in fact a camera, but that the OP might be in danger. Because not only was this object deceivingly a camera disguised as a pen, but it was hidden in a very private space, somewhere where no one should be watching. The bathroom. Worse than that, we come to find out that OP is 16 years old. They give more context here. The post reads, "Okay, I'll write a full update / life story now. My parents died in 2013, sending my brother and me to foster care. For the past 3 to 4 years, I've lived with this guy and his dad who have done some awful / creepy shit. It would feel wrong to exclude the fact that he supported my brother and me for so long, but this is unacceptable. A week ago, my brother moved out, leaving me with this guy who just put a camera facing the shower this morning. I posted this thread on my work break. Now I'm off work at home after talking with him about it. I don't want to live here anymore. I haven't for a while, but I have no one that will take me in at 16. I've built the last 3 years of my life living here. I have no idea what to do. I've tried calling CPS before and they came and left. That can't happen again. I'm pretty much alone in this house with no one to talk to or help me. What am I supposed to do?" Some people suggested they go to an Office Depot or Staples and confirm that it's a camera, which the OP did. The employees there agreed it most certainly was. So now, it was real. The OP could be in real danger. The first thought is to call the police or CPS, but like they said, the thought of contacting them again and them leaving was terrifying. They say, maybe because I don't want to be left alone with a deranged perv who's mad that CPS was called. So the user is stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Either way, it feels like they're backed into a corner with a monster. One solution is given by user Japanese Knotweed, who comments and says, "Where are you? You need to go to the actual CPS office in person. Take the camera pen with you. Bring a change of clothes and anything small, transportable, and precious. Everything you need to be reasonably comfortable for a few days, and just go. Sit down in the waiting area and say, I don't feel safe going back to the house until I know what this is and what's on it. Then don't get up until an option you feel good about shows up. There are short-term respite foster care providers in most areas, and this is one of the ways they can be of great help. Their only reply to this by OP was, "I called CPS for a different reason earlier this year, in a sort of way that would make it look like someone else called. They wanted to talk to me and ask every question right in front of the dude. Saying I'd like to talk to them in private didn't look too good. Well, I told them every messed up thing he's done the past few years, and especially what happened earlier that week, and I'm pretty sure they just saw me as a dramatic lying teen. Then they left." It makes sense why the user has no trust in CPS. The system has repeatedly failed them, pretty miserably. So much so that their first instinct, and really the only option in their mind, is to ask Reddit, which is just heartbreaking. She's just a kid. She should be able to trust the people who are supposed to keep her safe. But instead, they made her feel like she was too much. And now she's forced to live in this fear. Eventually, the user does give in and gives CPS one last try, even though she has low expectations. The user wrote, "Update, CPS has been called. I have a place I can stay at if they take me when they come. Now I play the waiting game. I'll update when they come." Although the OP has never updated us. They only left one last comment. That's the only reason I was hesitant to call in the first place. I've done it before, and they just left. I can only hope. It's a terrifying cliffhanger to leave us on, but that's all there is. Whether or not CPS actually helped her, if she could find a safe space to stay, or if her creep of a foster parent ended up keeping custody of her, we'll never know. Like internet user 1998 said herself, we can only hope. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying corners of Reddit. Would you like to see more videos like this in the future? If so, please comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I read every single comment, so please comment down below. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really does help so much. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. From the bottom of my heart, it means the world. And yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some horrifying forest Reddit stories, and oh boy, do I have some scary forest stories for you guys today. These stories range from skinwalkers to creatures to weird people in the woods, and these are just some of the best forest stories I have ever read. And you guys have been asking for some of these more forest and cryptid and skinwalker related videos for a while now, so here you go. I really hope you enjoyed today's stories. They had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, so I'm sure you guys will enjoy them as well. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel subscriber goal is 1 million subscribers before the end of the year, so please subscribe. And alright, this video will be long enough already, so sit back, relax, grab a drink or grab a snack, and without further ado, let's get into some horrifying forest Reddit stories. I saw a deer with forward-facing eyes. It followed me home. I first saw the deer a week ago. My boyfriend and I went hiking last weekend. It was for our anniversary, and we finally had some time off work to spend some time with one another. My boyfriend, Aaron, was so excited. He'd grown up in the mountains, and so he loved the idea of us heading out to his hometown to hike. It was sweet seeing him this happy. We'd been in a bit of a slump in our relationship because of work. He'd been put on nights and I still worked days, so we rarely saw each other. We had tried our best to see each other at home, but it was hard. This is exactly what we needed. Some quality time together. "You're gonna love this place," he had told me in the car. I promise. God, I wish that was true. It didn't take us long to reach his hometown. Smooth sailing, all things considered. Traffic was light, sun stayed up throughout, and the tunes were on point. It was your standard rural town. It was quiet and reserved. The place adorned with adorable little mom and pop shops and a miniature fountain in the center. We found this cute little cabin on the outskirts of town. It was small, but unbelievably cozy when you put the fire on. One thing that stood out to me was that the place was littered with huge pine trees. Aaron told me how proud he was when he climbed one of them as a kid. I shrugged it off. I mean, it's a tree, but oh my God. I understood how amazing of a feat that was now. These things were massive. They pierced through the clouds like giant shards of green. My neck killed after watching them for so long. I had never seen trees this big before. It was like they kept rising and rising and never stopped. There were tons of snowy mountains too. They encircled the town like a mighty wall, protecting it from outside dangers. It was simply breathtaking. Much different than the desert I grew up in. His parents still lived there, so we went to their place for dinner when we finished unpacking. They are a lovely couple. I hadn't eaten that well in a while. His mom made a spicy meatloaf and I ate so much of it. I had to pop my belt afterwards. Aaron couldn't really handle the spice, so it was hilarious seeing him gulp down liters of water in between each tiny morsel. His face was flushed after. So was his dad's. They looked so much like each other. Once dinner was finished, we all sat in their living room, nursing glasses of wine. Aaron drank the rest of his water. We left around 8 p.m. I can remember it because we wanted to head back before it was totally dark. The sun was setting, plunging the streets into shadow. The moon had been up for a while and now it had begun to shine beautifully against the darkening blue of the twilight sky. Street lamps hadn't been switched on yet, so we had to drive slowly and be on the lookout for people or animals. The lights from the shops became pinpricks in the rearview mirror, and eventually we reached the western outskirts of the town. I was lucky that Aaron knew the roads inside and out. I would have crashed as soon as we reversed out of his parents' driveway. We were quiet on the trip back. I think we didn't know what to talk about. Well, I'm full. Aaron's voice broke the silence. Yeah, me too. I gave a soft laugh. The car was noiseless again before we both spoke at the same time. Are you okay? We matched each other. For the first time in a while, the pair of us laughed together. It was gentle but genuine. It was nice. Yeah, I'm okay, I giggled. You? Yeah, not bad. Aaron chuckled to himself, hands relaxing on the wheel. The silence wasn't as tense anymore. We knew we were tired. That's all. The trail's going to look so pretty tomorrow, he chirped, that big smile of his returning to his face. I was going to say something when he immediately stuck his arm out and hit my chest, creating a barrier to hold me back. He stomped his foot on the brake, hard. He had held his arm out across my chest to keep me from plummeting forward into the windshield. It was so abrupt. I fell into his arm and had the air knocked out of my lungs. When the car jolted to a stop, I snapped backwards against the seat, narrowly avoiding banging the back of my head into the headrest. Aaron's arm was still shielding my chest when he fell backwards. Luckily, his head missed the headrest like myself, and he slowly leaned his neck back to put his head against the leather. We sat there, panting after the sudden stop. Aaron was looking forward, eyebrows furrowed and his mouth contorted into an open scowl. Came out of nowhere, he muttered under his breath. I stared onwards, eyes fixated on the object in the road. It was a deer. She was an average doe, antlerless, and she had pretty white freckles dotted on her back. She wasn't looking at us, though. Her head was facing the road ahead of us. Her ears were completely still, not even a quiver at the sound of the car screeching to a halt. A deer, I gasped out. Aaron had his lips pressed into a tight, thin line. I noticed his chest wasn't rising. and then came to the realization that he was holding his breath. His eyes were wobbling, tears forming. He hadn't blinked once since he slammed the brakes. In fact, he hadn't moved. "What?" he murmured in a wispy tone. He was breathless. I watched him with wary eyes, awaiting his reaction. I had never seen him this fearful before. It reminded me of a child staring into his closet when he heard a bump in the night. We sat there for another few seconds before I decided to take action and honk the horn. Looking back, I think this was the worst thing I had ever done. I pushed Aaron's arm towards him and I pressed harshly down on the horn. A quick beep echoed into the woods. I waited. The doe didn't move. I furrowed my brow and started to feel a strange discomfort in my skin. It was as if I had done something stupid. Hell, even illegal. This awful feeling ran up my neck. I was scared of a deer, of all things. The woods were pitch black by that point, and this unease made me want to head home as soon as we could. Aaron was obviously shaken. I hated feeling so afraid. So, out of embarrassment and anger, I yelled. I yelled at a deer. I moved back over to my side of the car and put the window down. I leaned out of it and yelled with as much power as my vocal cords could muster. "Move!" Fear definitely put some power behind my voice. As soon as the word left my lips, a rough hand ragged my shoulder back into the seat of the car. I looked back with confusion, only to see a horrified Aaron glaring at me. He put the window up and hissed, "What the hell are you doing?" "It's a deer," I snapped back, desperate to get away from the road and head home. "You haven't scared off a deer before?" Aaron shook his head in disbelief and turned back to the animal. I did so too, hoping that the deer had taken the hint and galloped off back into the undergrowth. It hadn't even flinched. The thing was still stuck there, neck twisted to the side and thin legs pinned straight. The dread washed over me, sending a horrible shiver down my spine. Maybe it was death? Then, as if it had heard me think, the deer ran off in the most awful way possible. It made me recoil so far back in my seat I was practically moving the chair back. It kept its legs straight and lobbled back into the bushes, like a crappy stop-motion movie. The deer kept its head facing away from us, bobbing back and forth. It looked like a spring bouncing around after you pull it back and let it go. It was jarring, seeing an elegant creature moving in such a disjointed way. It was slow too, taking its time to carefully plod back into the woods. Aaron and I looked at it disappear into the abyss of the pines, wide-eyed with disgust. He continued to stare at the animal before I had to shake him out of whatever trance he was trapped in. He shook his head and thrust the car into first gear, the pair of us eager to get into the cabin. It took another 10 minutes for us to reach it. Aaron was driving slightly above the speed limit, but I didn't blame him. I kept thinking about any logical reasons as to why the doe had behaved like that. When we eventually arrived, the pair of us sped walk inside and locked the door. Aaron double-checked all the windows were locked, and we stayed the night snuggled up in our bedroom watching a random drama on my laptop. The thought of the deer was fading now, with my consciousness nailing the whole thing down to tiredness. I had seen weird deer before. The idea of one being deaf or injured made more sense to me than it being anything unnatural. It was our anniversary tomorrow, and that was the main thing on my mind. Aaron, however, was twitchy all night. He was the one driving, so I could understand why he was unsettled. He's a good driver, and I guess that he was shocked he didn't see the deer earlier. The next morning was much better. Aaron woke me up with a breakfast in bed, much to my delight. He seemed much more calm than the night before. There was still a hint of nervousness behind his eyes, but I shrugged it off. I can't describe the happiness I felt just being there with him. The pair of us set off around 1, and the hike was supposed to last us for about 2 to 3 hours, depending on how long our breaks would be. It was supposed to be a wonderful couple of hours in nature. It was much longer than that. We told Aaron's parents that we'd be done by 4, and that we'd left a key under the doormat outside. We also told them which trail we were heading on, so they knew where we were if the worst case would happen. They then told us to look out for mountain lions, and we assured them we would. I was eager to get out there. Despite last night's events, it had been a while since I went hiking. But with Aaron by my side, I knew it was going to be a safe but fun trip. The first half of the trek was perfect. We walked around the forest, the great pines covering the mossy floor in shadow. The place was teeming with life, with squirrels dashing past our heads in the trees and birds chirping sweet songs in our ears. Aaron tried whistling back, to little response. "Guess my pitch is off," he chuckled. I gave it a go, and surprisingly, a couple of birds twittered back. Aaron feigned shock and snatched me up, before running with me down the trail, shouting, "You can have her, and she's mine." I was in complete stitches and laughed even harder when bewildered hikers walked past us, eyebrows raised and some giggling at our frantic display. At the end of the first half of the hike, we were rewarded with a scene of a beautiful lake. It was around there we stopped for a quick break. We sat on the side of the trail, watching the sun shimmering on the surface of the water. There were people all over it. Some were on canoes, some were windsurfing. Quite a lot of people were actually swimming. I could see their little heads bobbling around in the water. I think I took 20 pictures of the place. We stayed there a while before we set off back down the trail. The sun wouldn't go down for a while, so we took our time. I had completely forgotten about what happened last night. Aaron seemed a little bit on edge, but he was still grinning ear to ear. Sometimes I would see him look behind us. He disguised it as looking at me, but I knew of the real reason. The thought of that deer was still playing on his mind. In hindsight, I should have been more cautious too. Aaron lived here all of his childhood, so he knew what was normal around these woods. If Aaron was still anxious, I should have been too. The trail was still relatively busy. It was still early afternoon, so most people probably started hiking then. We'd walk past them, greeting fellow travelers. We could hear them behind us chatting about work or whose birthday it was that week. Normal things. We had less than half an hour left on our way back, and Aaron texted his parents to let them know. I looked up at the pines. The sun's rays tried their hardest to shine through the dense needles, showering the floor with little pinpricks of light. Then I heard a voice. It came from somewhere. I originally thought it came from in front of us. It could have been a hiker coming up the trail. The voice was faint, hardly above a whisper, although I would call it more of a groan. It was a rattling sound. I didn't think anything of it and waited to see who was walking up the trail. We went on, smiles still stretched across our faces. Unfortunately, no one ever walked past. I could see Aaron tense in his shoulders. He stuck his hand out and waggled it, prompting me to take it. I sped up and walked closer to him, holding his hand. He didn't look down at me, but he acknowledged my presence with a squeeze of my hand. I was going to turn and see if it was someone messing with us, but Aaron squeezed my hand again and looked at me with big eyes. He gave a soft shake of his head and gestured with his eyes to remain looking ahead. The voice grew louder the more we walked. It wasn't actually saying much, just a bunch of babbling. Sharp breaths punctuated every syllable. It kept changing its intonation too. One moment it would be as happy as a child, letting out stifled giggles. Other times it would be nervously whimpering. Sometimes it would be angry, like letting out growls and cut off yelps. It was almost as if it were speaking to us from all angles. Sometimes hisses would come from the left. Some gasps would come from the right. It wanted us to look at it. It got colder. The sun was still high in the sky, but a grim, cold wind had picked up, and I ended up having to put my hands in my pockets. We entered an area where there was debris on the ground. Needles and sticks, that kind of thing. We walked a bit faster through this part, hoping to reach the exit as quickly as possible. We had to be less than 15 minutes away now, so we were close. Along with the crunching underfoot, the voice followed us. It was actually getting more vocal now, yipping and letting out whoops. Couldn't tell if they were happy screams or annoyed ones. It was close to us though. Horribly close. A rancid smell had started to permeate the air. Rotten meat with a hint of ammonia. Last time I smelt something like that, I went camping with my dad. Shot a buck right in front of me, and I can remember the sound of the bullets going past. He didn't even do anything with its corpse. He just slept by it for 3 nights, and that dreadful smell grew. I didn't sleep a wink. Instead, I watched it every night, imagining it jerking to life and taking its revenge. At the time, I wanted it to. It was one of the last times I ever went camping with him. Thankfully, old drunk. The crunches were clear, coming from all sides. I wanted to look, I really did. Aaron, however, kept a hand on my back and was almost pushing me along. So I kept looking forward. I wanted someone to come past us, a regular person, just so we had some company, to prove that this wasn't real. Then, we found out where the voice was. A loud snap of a twig echoed from right behind us. It caught us so off guard, we halted to a stop. Whatever was following us did as well. My heart hammered hard against my chest. It had been behind us the entire time. It had ceased its warbling and now was completely silent. There was no breathing. Nothing. I looked over at Aaron, pleading. He looked at me back, eyes locked on my face. His breathing went quiet and he mouthed, "Don't," to me. I returned my gaze to the road ahead and swallowed. I saw a marker on the left of me. We were close and could probably sprint to the exit. I was running through each of the signs and where they were when I heard a sound that sent an ice-cold shiver down my back. Aaron. The voice was so horribly familiar, yet so alien. It was my own voice, deep and gravelly. It was like whatever was behind us drawing out the sounds, testing its ability. Aaron bristled at the sound with a grimace. It sounded so much like me, except it was throaty and aged. It tried again with a higher pitch. It sounded more like me, but just not quite. The foul smell lingered, almost making me gag. It smelt so pungent and strong. I believe now that the smell was its breath. We didn't really smell anything like that before the voice came, and it must have been so close to us we had began to pick up on the scent. I don't know. My eyes made their way to Aaron's, who was looking back at me with a fear I had never seen before. He mouthed to me, "Run." That's all I needed. Before Aaron could react, I had already began sprinting down the trail, running as fast as my legs could take me. I jumped over the roots of the tree, trying not to fall. I heard Aaron behind me, his feet stomping against the ground. Soon, my legs were aching and my heart was desperately thudding, trying to keep up with the fact that I had sprinting for a while. I'm a desk jockey and do zero cardio, okay? I ran and ran and ran. I kept frantically looking for the markers. Hell, I was looking for the exit. Nothing but the endless rows of pine trees and the odd bushes dotted around. I had to stop. I didn't know where I was, and the sounds had gone quiet. Surely it would be okay for me to turn around. So I slowed to stop, legs wobbling from the adrenaline. I turned around and scanned the area. Aaron was nowhere to be seen. I had lost him. My stomach dropped to the floor. I spun around and watched. He was nowhere. How had I gone the wrong way? This trail had one road. I didn't change trail or reach any crossroads, but somehow I had managed to go further into the woods. It was impossible for me to not be at the opening. I took in huge gulps of air and started to look around and yell out for Aaron. My throat hurt so much. It was useless, really. My mind began to race. I had to figure out how to find the exit. I stood up and breathed in. Aaron? My blood froze. In my panic, I had totally neglected the fact I wasn't alone. The voice was ridiculously close to mine now, and the only thing holding it back from being an identical copy was the fact it hadn't nailed down my accent. I have a southern accent. This voice had something akin to someone with Valley Girl accent trying to do a southern one. It was a terrible impression, but it genuinely sounded like something I would come out with. Then, the next sound it made caused me to jump so far in the air, my knees cracked when I landed. It made the sound of a car horn honking. It was so ear-piercing and loud, my ears rang afterwards. It was short and punchy, like a little pip you'd do if the person in front hadn't moved when the lights go green. Now, I would have laughed at that. It's a car now, I would have thought. Instead, I thought, it's our car now? The warning beep I had given the deer that night just rang out in the middle of the woods. It did it again, louder this time. I think it was trying to make me scream or something because it kept making me jump when it did that. It kept on hopping from one place to another, searching for me. When I got closer, I backed up to one of the pines and held my breath. For all I knew, it could have been behind me. I just breathed. I kept my eyes forward like Aaron told me to, and breathed in, out, in, out. It's all I could do. The place went silent again, fear swirling in my stomach. I thought it found me. Then I felt something touch my shoulder. The fingers were long and they buried themselves into the flesh. Slowly, my eyes crept towards the hand, until eventually I followed the arm. It went up above me. When I saw what was there, I nearly screamed. There, crouched on one of the bigger branches of the pine, was Aaron with a finger to his lips. He held out his hand and braced himself against the branch, moving from a crouch to a seated position. I grabbed the hand hard, pushing myself upwards and towards the branch just below him. My right hand made it onto the branch, and I reached up with my left hand. Aaron pulled me upwards, careful to not fall himself. Just as I thought I'd made it safely onto the branch box, my left foot slipped and I smashed my knee against the bark. I bit back a yelp and bared my teeth. Oh my god, that hurt. I didn't even want to imagine looking down, so I weakly pulled my leg back up and made my way up the tree. The voice was further away now, the sound of Aaron's voice calling for me. It made us shudder. Eventually, we made it to a branch high enough to be safe and thick enough to hold us. We could see the ground through the gaps of the needles. I took a seat and looked at my knee. Blood made my blue leggings go a vile purple. Scratches in the fabric showed my ripped skin, as deep red trickled from the gashes. It stung like hell. Aaron placed a hand on my lower back and kissed my forehead. I fell into his touch and put my head into his neck. Wet dribbles of tears dripped into my scalp. Aaron was crying. He was always the more emotional one out of us. We established that quite early in our relationship when Aaron had held me, bawling over a nature documentary where a lion took down a gazelle. That was our second date. I can remember how I stared at him with disgust. A few years later, and I still do, but now I hug him back and laugh. Growing up in a poor household teaches you to control your emotions. One wrong look and shit hits the fan. I guess that's what drew me to Aaron in the first place. He did stuff like that, and nothing happened. His parents would chuckle instead of screaming at him. It was the nicest kind of weird I have ever experienced. The voice had rounded back to our tree, and it was back to mimicking me. Move. Once again, using what I told it last night to coax us out. It did this for about a minute, and then we saw a flash of a brown blur speed past the tree. The blur waddled backwards, reversing. Then I saw it. This deer wasn't a deer. We established this, but it didn't make the reveal any less horrifying. It didn't look at us and was looking deep into the forest. Then it heard something and faced our way. Its eyes weren't on the sides of its head. They were at the front, like a predator, like a human. They didn't look human. They were regular deer eyes, which I feel made it worse, small and beady. The sun was just setting, so the last bits of light reflected off the eyes. Once darkness began to hit, they changed. In the light of the sunset, I squinted and saw how it shook its head around violently. It looked up in an instant and faced away from the tree. Then it turned, and I saw how its eyes were blown out. Visibly, they had grown a lot, and now they were almost black. Better for searching. It spun around again and leapt off into the undergrowth. I heard a roaring sound before I heard a voice I didn't recognize. It was a little boy. Aaron! Aaron let out a gasp and slapped his hand over his mouth. Tears were in full flow now, and his hands were shaking. Over here. Then a giggle, a childlike cough, and the worst sound of the lot, a young boy screaming bloody murder. Aaron clapped his hands over his ears and sucked in wet breaths. I wrapped my arms around him, stroking his flank. I could hear him muttering, "It's not Jake, it's not him," over and over. "Aaron!" It continued to wail. "Mom! Dad!" It was awful. Its voice kept on wavering back and forth between voices. It had seemingly perfected the Jake voice, as Aaron kept on choking on his breath whenever it copied the boy. It had pretty much decided that we were close because it stayed in the same position for the rest of the time we were up there, right next to the tree we were in. The sun had set fully then, so it was hard to see anything. My eyes adjusted, but it was still difficult. It went on and on, draining the pair of us. It got to the point where we were used to the screams and now realized that whatever was making the voices was doing it on a loop like a broken record. My voice, Aaron's, unknown boy, and then Jake. It was so mentally draining. I was fully considering jumping down and getting it over and done with. At least I would be dying or going missing with the one I loved, as dismal as that seems. I really couldn't think of anything else in the moment. It messed with me. As soon as I was going to close my eyes, a loud bang shot through the air. We heard a loud, warbling scream and the thundering sound of feet underneath. A gruff voice yelled our full names and ran around the tree. A couple more pairs of feet followed. This had to be the Rangers. "Up here," I called down to them. The flashlight beams shone around until they brought them up to our tree. Thankfully, it was the Rangers. We clambered down and were greeted with the sight of 3 park rangers and Aaron's dad, their faces ashy. I almost fell to my knees in joy and exhaustion. Aaron just caught me at the last second and choked out a sob. We had been found. Aaron carried me back to the entrance of the woods. The place looked so different in the dark. Aaron's mom was waiting for us with the other officers. She had been in floods of tears too, immediately running towards us. I had never felt so tired in my entire life. One of the officers took us to the hospital. I had splinters all in the gashes and my muscles were exposed. Seriously gross stuff, but nothing was broken, so I wasn't worried. Everything happened so fast, you know? Aaron was fine, and that's all I cared about. It was our anniversary after all. It may surprise you to find out we headed home the very next day. We were quiet on the way back. I had so many questions to ask, but with one look at Aaron's face, I faced forward and closed my eyes. We were both too tired for talking. Once we got home, Aaron checked the house and collapsed on our bed. I stayed up and numbly watched a crappy comedy. No matter how much I watched, I could still hear the screams. Sometime I dropped off, don't know when, but when I woke up, Aaron was boiling some water, and the smell of coffee wafted its way to the living room. He walked in and handed me a cup, pressing a soft kiss to my temple with a warm smile. We sat in silence, dumbly watching the TV, when he sighed. "I'm sorry I took you there." I cocked my head. "It wasn't your fault." Silence. I knew what was in there. I held the cup of coffee and stared at him. "What?" He sniffled and coughed. "I remember everything." "What?" He turned to me, eyes watery. "Seen it again." He shook his head. "Everything came back." What did that even mean? I opened my mouth before Aaron spoke again. "They told me his family moved away." His eyes were glassy now, swimming with memories. "Jake's family?" I was gentle, hoping to not set him off crying. He nodded and took a sip of his coffee. "One day he was there, the next he wasn't." "Now you know why?" He nodded again, morosely. We sat there for a while. "We were camping for our birthday. We had the same birthday." Aaron looked up, recounting the events like they happened yesterday. "It was our 12th. I let him speak. "We were so excited, Elle." His eyes fluttered. "Then we heard it." "The deer?" "Yeah, the deer." He let out a cruel laugh. "If only." "What happened?" He took another sip before he started up again. It called to us in our voices, saying stuff like "over here" and our names. Aaron placed the cup on the table. We thought it was funny. I get that. You guys were kids. Yeah, well, we found it so funny, we asked you to come out and wish us a happy birthday. And I have never seen something more horrible in my entire life. He shook slightly, face gradually going pale. We screamed. So it didn't look like a deer, or it did, and we just didn't see its real form. We ran away, or I did. It's hard to remember. He wet his lips. I can remember hearing Jake fall, and I turned to look at him. I reached over and rubbed his arm when he became emotional. He brought a hand up to his lips and stared at a corner of the room. I ran over and tried to pull him up. He gasped, and it just batted me away like a fly. His eyes were downcast. There was so much blood. He looked at me to respond, but I didn't and let him speak. It dragged him away, and I ran so far, ended up climbing a tree and camping there for a while. How long? He shrugged. All I know was that I sat there until the sun went down and the noises stopped. Then I ran home. You tell your folks? He nodded sheepishly. They told the police, they went and checked it out, found blood and blamed it on a cougar. He forced out a laugh. Huh. Then it spoke to me. It spoke to you? I was leaned forward in my seat now. Yes, when I was about to drift off to sleep. He lowered his voice to a whisper. I'll come back to you. Then you can join them. I swallowed thickly. Why hadn't it come earlier for him? Was he trying to ripen him up? It just made me feel sick. Did you see it again? No. I stayed out of the woods, and it didn't bother me anymore. The air was thick, hard to breathe. It must have used this hike as a chance to take him. I could have saved him. You were a kid, Aaron. So fucking what, he snapped at me. I could have saved him. Could you? He paused and watched me intently. His eyes bounced from one side to the next, seemingly going through every possible outcome. With a furrow of his brow, I guess he realized that he couldn't have done anything. He sat back in his seat on the sofa. His eyes were still cloudy, clearly still thinking. I leaned over and rested my head on his shoulder, holding his arm. Strange what the mind hides from you, huh? I didn't say anything. I mean, what can you say to that? We tried to get on with our lives. I went back to work, so did Aaron. We acted like we had the best anniversary of our lives, because what else could we do? Tell my manager that we had some kind of monster deer chase us down in the middle of the woods and we kept hearing it mimicking us and Aaron's dead childhood friend? See how ridiculous that sounds? So we put on our happy faces. It was harder for Aaron, obviously. He's looking to see a therapist. He's also talking with the police from his hometown over Jake's disappearance. Jake's parents are yet to say anything. Can't imagine what they're going through. He told me he couldn't live with himself if he stayed quiet. I try to look more on the positive side nowadays. I used to be very cynical, and I blame my upbringing for that. When I met Aaron, stuff changed. He was just so enthusiastic about life. Car broke down in the rain. Well, at least we have shelter. Lost your wallet? Well, we can always get a new one. You feel guilty for cutting contact with your parents? You had to do that for your safety. Always, he's been able to turn bad situations on their head and find the silver lining in the cloud, even if it's barely visible. He brought out that optimistic part of me that I hid for so long. He helped me out of that horrible pit and made me see the light in life again. Since that day, I've been seeing less and less of that happy-go-lucky guy. I'm not complaining at all, by the way, please know that. I'd be more disturbed if he just went on with life like nothing happened. But I feel like I've been taking him for granted. I want to help him through this. He helped me, so I'm going to help him too. He assures me I don't need to, but I will anyway. I love him. And if that means I wait on every hand and foot for him, I'll fucking do it. I thought we were in the clear after we left that place. Turns out I was wrong. This happened earlier today, and I'm still shook up writing this. I was at home after work, and I went upstairs to go change. It looked like Aaron had just left before my arrival because he left the bathroom light on. I was about to flip the switch when I saw something. It was a bit hard to see because of the frosted glass, but there was something outside. It was a dark, fragmented blob. I was tempted to open the window to see what it was. I mean, it could have been a piece of clothing that had came into the backyard. Suddenly, a shiver ran down my spine and I writhed in my spot. I halted and watched the blob. It was completely still, which put doubt on my clothing theory. It was quite windy outside, so the clothing would have wafted around or flown off. This thing stayed deathly still. It had 4 little stumps under it like table legs. Maybe they were legs. Cats often came into our yard, with the next door neighbor having 2 of them. It looked bigger than a cat though. I blamed the frosted glass for the distortion, but that theory didn't last long either. The thing began to move. It lifted each of the stumps one by one, which now solidified my belief that this was indeed an animal, and then crouched down. Then, much to my horror, the thing lifted itself up onto 2 legs, body rising high into the air. It stood straight up, the stumps now longer. What the hell? It didn't wobble or fall, but instead went stiff as a board and raised its 5th stump, which I figured out was its neck. So this thing was either staring away from me or directly at me. It was hard to see, but I think it was looking at me. Then an awful thought came to my mind. It couldn't be that deer. It couldn't. The thing and I were just staring at each other, and I seriously hoped that it couldn't see me. Then I realized something. I had the bathroom light on, and I was standing at the window. It could definitely see me. Thoughts of the screaming and hollering from that night played over and over in my mind. Had it followed us home? My body tensed up and refused to breathe. I had gone very much into prey mode, and I was now trying my best to hide myself, which, let's be honest, isn't going to go down well when you're stood under a spotlight. I don't know how long I stayed there. After a while, the thing gave up and, whilst still on its hind legs, it staggered off into the bush behind the house. I cried. I cried so hard. I ended up squeezed into the corner of the bathroom, shaking like a leaf with tears running down my cheeks. I can't remember the last time I cried like that. It must have been when I first moved in with Aaron, and that was a long time ago. After this release of pent-up emotion, I pulled myself together and called Aaron. I gushed, spilling everything to him. I thought we'd lost connection because he was so quiet. He eventually told me he'd be home soon and that I should start to pack a bag. I didn't have any time to respond before he hung up, and I was left baffled. When he came home, he came into our bedroom and started piling clothes into his duffel bag. "Where are we going?" I asked, staring at my boyfriend in surprise. He had never been this serious before. "I'll tell you in the car." He didn't even bother looking away from his bag. "Babe, what's going on?" "Shh." He shushed me sharply. "I'll tell you in the car." I went back to folding my clothes and chucking spare glances at him. His face was completely blank and his hands were working on autopilot. We left the house that evening. As soon as we packed, is it bad to say that Aaron scared me a little? I had never seen this part of him at all. It was almost like he was angry. We got settled in the car and he pulled out of the driveway. "Are you going to tell me where we're going now?" He stayed quiet and faced the road. "Aaron." I was getting irritated now. He pursed his lips and flicked his eyes over to the rearview mirror. "Aaron, will you answer me?" "Shut up," he hissed, eyes bobbing from the rear view to the windshield and back again. I sat there speechless. That was the first time he had told me to shut up and meant it. There wasn't any venom behind the words, and I didn't know what to make of it. So I did what I'd learned to do when people were pissed off. I stayed quiet and, much to my shame, I disassociated. He was stressed and I was making things harder. I think I must have disassociated for about an hour before I felt Aaron squeezing my shoulder. We were outside a dive bar. I had no idea where we were. "You okay, sweet?" He was rubbing into the meat of my shoulder, face full of concern. About an hour of time lost. I heard him call my name and I woke up from that familiar trance. Where are we? It was the only thing I was thinking about. "Let's, get inside first, yeah?" Something in me just snapped. What was this? "No," I bit. "You tell me right now, Aaron." He threw his head back against the headrest inside. "Can we just get inside, Elle?" "Aaron, please." I stared right at him. "I'm scared." It was rare for me to say that out loud. Aaron knew that. He quickly looked around all the car, peeking in the windows before he turned to me. He beckoned me close to him, and I obeyed. Then he whispered something in my ear. It might still hear us. I had a full-body shiver and made my stomach fill with dread. "So, we need other people to block out conversation?" I whispered back. He nodded. I understood, even if it sounded bizarre. We grabbed a bite to eat and sat in the middle of the booths, multiple families chatting beside us. Finally, we could talk. That leads me to now. I'm sitting in the car. Aaron's driving. In the span of a week, my life has been turned upside down. Life was good. It was good. I was with the man I loved and away from all the shit in my life. My parents were out of my social circle, and Aaron's family took their place. My life was good. Now we're running back to his hometown. It sounds stupid. However, there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, home isn't safe anymore. That thing knows where we live. Number two, we could vacate to somewhere far off, but money is not good at the moment, and even then, that thing could follow us. We have no idea where this thing can go. Finally, 3. Aaron told his parents and they believed us, mainly because his dad saw the deer. They know someone who can help us. Hopefully, that makes more sense as to why we've decided to head back. We're going to stay to the highways, no back roads unless we have to. Hopefully, that thing either stays away, or if it follows us, it gets ran over by a truck. It probably wouldn't kill it, but it would slow down. I hope. I'm going to finish this post here. Aaron and I are in the car now, and we're close to the highway. I just hope we get there safely. Wish us luck. And this is the last time we have ever heard from the OP, so hopefully the OP and the OP's husband are alive and safe and away from that monster. I asked my best friend to tell me the scariest thing that had ever happened to him. Written by Sapphire Lion 15. Nate and I were at his parents' cabin in Ontario to celebrate the start of summer. We'd both taken a week off of work and planned a 4-day vacation of nothing but hiking, biking, canoeing, and enjoying a break from our hectic lives in the city. I honestly don't remember much of the vacation itself. It was a lot of fun, sure, but we did so much of the same stuff that it's all sort of a blur. Whenever I think of that trip, the only thing that I can remember is that conversation. Probably because I want so desperately to forget it. We'd finished a simple but tasty dinner of hot dogs and potato chips. We both wanted beers, but we'd blown through what we brought with us. It was raining, with occasional thunderclaps. I thought it was peaceful. We were sitting in front of a roaring fireplace, working through a pot of coffee. It was dark and fairly late, but neither of us felt like going to bed, probably because of the coffee, so we ended up just talking. The first few minutes of our conversation were nothing noteworthy, just small talk. Somehow, I really have no idea how, the conversation turned to some of the weird animals we'd seen during the trip. Nate brought up how, while we'd been hiking the day before, a snake had slithered across the trail, most likely startled by us. I had let out a very unmanly scream and jumped a foot in the air. I chuckled and explained that I was afraid of snakes because when I was 9, my brother's pet boa constrictor escaped its terrarium, made its way out of his bedroom, and ate my pet hamster. My parents got rid of the boa and made my brother apologize to me. But I'd been afraid of the reptiles ever since. I said, without exaggeration, that walking in on that creature swallowing my still kicking hamster was the scariest thing I ever saw. Nate looked sympathetic and handed me a cookie from the package we'd been snacking on. We were silent for a minute, listening to the rain and fire, when I asked the question, "What's the scariest thing that ever happened to you?" Nate seemed to freeze. I wondered for a moment if he hadn't heard me. Then I noticed that his coffee cup was violently shaking. The thankfully lukewarm at that point coffee had spilled all over his hands and onto the blanket in his lap. Nate? The sound of my voice brought him back to reality. He sucked in a quick breath and noticed that his hand and blanket were soaked in coffee. He frowned and got up, swearing at the spilled coffee. I'm sorry, No, I'm sorry, I didn't know you'd, freeze up like that. You don't have to tell me if you don't. No." He was so blunt that it surprised me. He'd gotten rid of the ruined blanket. It was a cheap one anyway. Wiped off his hand and refilled his coffee cup. He came back and sat in his chair facing me. We'd been friends for years, but I'd never seen him look so grave. It's been years since I thought of it. the scariest thing that ever happened to me? As much as I want to, though, I'll never forget it. Do you want to talk about it? No, but I will. I need to. Just remember something for me. I'm not making this up. I couldn't if I tried. This isn't some campfire ghost story that happened to my brother's friend's sister's mailman or anything like this. I'm not making this up, okay? I nodded. Despite his warnings, my interest had tripled. He sighed and took a long sip from his coffee. He turned and faced the fire. He didn't look at me once through the story. I asked questions and he answered every one, but he never turned away from the fire. I was 17 and feeling like I was the king of the world. I just paid for, with my parents' help, a used but nice red pickup truck. One of the prettiest girls in my school was my girlfriend. I had just gotten a letter of acceptance to my dad's alma mater. I thought things couldn't get better. To celebrate, Sabrina, my girlfriend, our friend, AJ, and a lot of our friends threw a party. I don't really remember it, but it's where I first heard about the old Raindrop Inn. The Raindrop Inn? Yeah, it was some old hotel back in the 1920s or 1930s. No one knew the full story, but rumor had it that the town founder had built the hotel for his wife. That it had been her dream to live in a hotel. On the opening night, however, the founder found his wife in their bedroom, fooling around with a bellboy. She screamed when she saw her husband, and apparently she opened the balcony door and committed S-word. The founder never set foot in the hotel again and later sold it to the highest bidder. It was open for another 20 years. During that time, 18 people died in it. Most of them committed S-word via the balcony, just like the founder's wife. A maid who saw one of them jump says that the guest screamed, "Leave me alone," into the bedroom before she committed S-word. When the maid checked, there was no one in the bedroom. What about the other guests? The ones that didn't commit S-word? Only 5 of the dead guests didn't. I don't remember the other 2, but there was a couple that were found tied together in a full bathtub, fully clothed, with a plugged-in TV in there with them. The other was a young boy who just disappeared. His mother told the police that she tucked her son into bed and heard some terrible squealing noise after she shut the door. She described it as a sort of squeal of delight, and it wasn't from her son. She ran back in, and he was gone. No body, no blood, nothing. Apparently, that was the last straw. The owner was sick of bad publicity and closed the place down. I learned all of this the night of that party. I didn't believe it and told the guys that they told a nice ghost story. They got defensive and told me to go see it for myself if I didn't believe them. Then they told me where to find it. Everyone knew that it was just inside the forest behind the high school. I laughed it off and we continued to party. But I kept that story in my mind. The next night, Sabrina was over at my house. We were trying to watch a movie, but my little brother Pete wouldn't leave us alone. He kept saying that it was his turn for the TV, that he was going to tell Mom if we didn't hand over the remote. "Do you have a little brother?" I nodded. "Then you probably know how I felt." I finally threw the remote down on the couch and went onto the porch with Sabrina. We were talking. She was suggesting we go to her house to watch the movie. I forget what exactly we were talking about. Anyway, my mom walks out of the house and tells me that she needs to run out for a few hours. She was a vet, and some asshole, her words not mine, had run over a dog. She told me I was in charge and asked Sabrina if she wanted a ride home. She said no, that we were going to finish our movie. Mom told me she'd be home by 1 a.m., reminded me to watch Pete, and left. I told Sabrina that if Pete was going to be a pain and hog the TV all night, then I didn't really want to stay home. It was a Friday night, not to mention the start of summer. I told her that we should do something exciting, something cool. She asked me what I wanted to do. At that point, it was 8 at night, and a few places were closed. I thought for a second before I remembered the night before. I asked her if she had heard about the Rain Drop Inn. Surprisingly, she hadn't. I told her what the guys had told me the night before. She listened, but asked when I was done why I brought it up. I told her that I wanted to go see it. She laughed at me. Very funny. I told her I was serious. If it was as close as the guys at the party had said, then we could be there and back before my mom got home. She was quiet for a second, then started to look excited. She'd always had a bit of a fascination with urban legends, and I knew that it wouldn't take much convincing to get her to go to the old hotel. But then her face fell again. You have to watch your brother. Remember? There's no way that he wouldn't tell your mom. I cursed under my breath. She was right. If Pete knew what we were doing, he'd want to come. The kid had read every Goosebumps book twice and loved scary stuff. If he came, he'd ruin the fun. And if we left, he'd tell mom. Then I had an idea. When I was a kid, my dad got Pete and I into collecting these little Hot Wheels cars. I kept up my collection even in my teens and had about 300 by that night. Pete had less than half of that, and he was seriously jealous of my collection. I'd even caught him in my room once or twice trying to steal the more impressive models. I told Sabrina that I knew what to do and went inside. Pete had turned the TV to one of those kids' channels and got mad when I paused it, but he heard me out. I told him that I would give him 50 of the cars from my collection. His choice, if he didn't tell mom about Sabrina and I going out for a while. He agreed, but asked where we were going. Just some place some friends at school told me about. He seemed suspicious, but nodded. He then turned back to the TV and pulled his favorite red baseball cap down to his eyebrows, signaling that the conversation was over. I went up to my room to grab a flashlight and a jacket. When I came downstairs, the TV was off and Pete was gone. I assumed that he'd gone to his room and went back to the porch. Sabrina was annoyed that I'd taken so long, but then smiled and said she wanted to go. I turned towards my truck and was halfway to the driveway when Sabrina told me to turn around. I had left the front door open. I pulled my key from my pocket, shut the door, and locked it. But I was confused. I was sure I'd locked the door on my way out the first time. Hadn't I? I shook it off and went to the car with Sabrina. It was barely 5 minutes from our house to the high school, but we wasted 10 driving around, looking for the old, unkempt road that allegedly led to the raindrop. Finally, I parked my truck and we both got out. I turned on the flashlight and we walked out. Finally, Sabrina spotted it. You wouldn't notice it from a distance, as a lot of grass had grown between the cracks, but there was a lot of really broken asphalt that made a trail leading into the woods. We looked at each other and grinned. We were about to start when I heard a sound like a car door slamming. We both turned to my truck, but there was nothing there. I remembered then that I hadn't locked it, and pressed the button on my key fob. Sabrina, more eager now than ever, grabbed my upper arm and pulled me down the path. We walked for maybe 20 minutes before we found it. We both sort of froze when it came into view. I don't think either of us had completely believed that it was real, but there it was. It looked like it had once been nice. It was 3 stories tall. It must have been really well built if it was still standing after 70 years, 50 of them with no maintenance. Still, the age showed. The building was being strangled by kudzu, with every window being broken or having no glass at all. The original color of the walls was impossible to guess, as the wind, rain, and time had turned them an earthy brown. The roof was missing multiple tiles. There were massive cracks in the walls, and the front porch was sagging. To top it all off, we clearly hadn't been the first people to visit the place. Graffiti, written in neon orange spray paint, had been sprayed on several blank spots on the walls. Keep out, run, stay away, danger. Stuff like that was written whenever the artist could find space. We should have gone home right then and there. I was scared out of my mind, and judging by how tightly she was holding my hand, Sabrina was too. But we still wanted to go in. Maybe I was being stupid that night. Maybe I wanted to look tough in front of my girlfriend. I don't know, but we went in. The hotel was even creepier inside. At first glance, I thought it looked more like an old barn than an old hotel. Then, as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw that, yes, it had been a hotel. There was the front desk, covered in mouse turds. There was the lobby bell, so rusty that it would never ring again. The half-eaten couch, lopsided love seat, and upside-down chair had been the sitting area in the lobby. There was even a luggage cart buried under so many dusty cobwebs that it looked like a sheer white curtain had been draped over it. From holes in the ceiling, moonlight illuminated the room. "Well, this is inviting," Sabrina whispered. "You scared?" I whispered back, hoping she would say yes so that we could leave. "No," she responded, still whispering. I knew she was lying. You don't bury your fingernails into someone's shoulder if you're relaxed. "Are you scared?" "No," I lied. "Why are we whispering?" "I don't know," she said, speaking normally. "Do you want to try and go upstairs?" I did not. What I wanted was to get out of there, make a beeline for the truck, go home and wrestle the TV remote from Pete, but I didn't want my girlfriend to think I was a wimp. So I tried to look brave and nodded. The stairs were in surprisingly good shape, considering the state of the rest of the hotel. We had to dodge cobwebs, which hung from the ceiling of the stairwell like party streamers, but we didn't have trouble getting to the next floor. That's when things got really creepy. The first thing we saw when we got to the hotel's second floor was a lump in the middle of the floor. Sabrina glanced at me, and I walked over to the lump. I only took one look before jumping back in disgust. The lump was a rabbit, or it had been. It was dead, and I didn't have to be a doctor to see what had killed it. There was a hole in its chest the size of my fist. From the 2-second glance I took, I could see that the rabbit's organs were all gone. There wasn't even blood. The rabbit was nothing more than literal skin and bones. I did not tell Sabrina this. I just said that the rabbit had been killed by something and that we should probably go. She was clearly freaked out by the rabbit, even if she didn't know how bad it was mutilated. We might have left right then if we hadn't heard something. Footsteps. We both froze and slowly turned to look at the door to the stairwell. Someone was coming up the stairs. I threw open the first door I saw. The lock was so old that it fell off when I opened the door. I sort of hugged Sabrina to me and pulled her into the room. I closed the door as quietly as I could, hoping that whatever was coming up the stairs hadn't heard us in the hall. We both heard the door to the stairwell open. We looked at each other and both put our fingers over our lips. I've never seen Sabrina's eyes so wide, and I have a feeling mine looked the same. We listened closely as the thing that had walked up the stairs began to walk slowly down the hall. I heard it stop at what must have been the rabbit's corpse. At that point, I realized that I heard a new noise. There were voices coming from the hallway. No, not the hallway. Those voices were coming from all over the floor. I wrapped my arms around Sabrina as we listened. From somewhere there came an inhuman squeal of delight, followed by the scream of a small child. From a bathroom somewhere up the hall, there was begging and screaming, followed by a violent splash and the unmistakable sound of electricity. A woman screamed, "Leave me alone," followed by a window shattering and a distant, heavy thud. My already hammering heart rate accelerated when I realized what I was listening to. I remembered the story from the party, how a child had disappeared, a couple had been electrocuted, a woman had committed S-word. We'd just listened to those people die. Those sounds finally stopped, followed by what sounded like a sharp draw of breath from the hallway. I noticed then that the room was cold, eerily cold, especially for a night in late May, and it was quickly getting colder, like the source of the chill was moving up the hall. There was a sudden scream. I was so rattled that I screamed. So did Sabrina. At that moment, instincts took over. I forgot about looking cool and just wanted out of there. I grabbed Sabrina's hand and charged through the door like a fullback. It was so old that I actually knocked it off its hinges as I ran. I caught a glimpse of some shapeless white thing. I didn't look any longer than that, and charged for the door to the stairwell. Considering how fast I was running, I'm amazed that neither of us hurt ourselves as he rocketed downstairs. Despite my panic, I noticed something in the lobby I hadn't before. There was a pile in the corner. A pile of limp, furry bodies. They all had holes in them. At that point, I didn't want to see anymore. Still holding Sabrina's hand, I sprinted across the lobby, flew out the front door, and tripped on the porch. We both landed face down on the forced floor. I didn't know or care if I was hurt. I immediately got up, clawing at the dirt to get friction. Sabrina was a few steps ahead of me, calling at me to keep running, to not look back. Screams were pouring from the hotel windows, screams of pain and terror. That was all the incentive I needed to pick up my pace. I ran so fast that night that I think I broke a few Olympic records. The second we saw the truck, we both jumped in. I twisted the key and stomped on the gas. My truck broke the speed limit 3 times over as we made a break for my house. When the school was out of view, I slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. We took a moment to catch our breath. Sabrina was crying. She'd been so scared. Honestly, I was too. Nothing in my life had prepared me for that. I wondered how close we'd come to disappearing or dying that night. We stayed in my truck for a while, trying to get a hold of ourselves and processing what had happened. Finally, we both felt stable enough to go back to my house. At that point, it was midnight, and my mom would be home in an hour. I expected Pete to still be parked in front of the TV, and I remembered that I still needed to give him the cars he wanted. At that moment, I was ready to give him the full collection. After that night, toy cars didn't seem important anymore. Sabrina went in first, while I parked the car. I went in and saw she wasn't there. I heard her upstairs and went to make us a snack. I just pulled out the chips and salsa when I heard her run down the stairs. I turned around with the chip platter, smiling. She must have been hungry. Then I looked at her face. That's when I saw how scared she was. She looked me in the eyes and practically shouted, "Where's your brother?" Tears started streaming down his face. Pete had hidden in the back of my truck. He'd overheard what I said on the porch about the hotel, and he'd gone with us. He opened the front door, he slammed my truck door, he was making the footsteps we heard on the stairs, and he was the one who screamed. I left him there. For a few minutes, he was silent. I sat back, stunned. I didn't know what to say. Finally, he spoke again. A week later, I went back to that hotel. I don't know why, closure maybe. As I drove up, I saw it on the porch. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want it to be there, but it was. Pete's red baseball cap. He took a deep breath and finally looked at me again. And that is the scariest thing that ever happened to me. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. The fire was still blazing, and the rain was still hammering down. But it wasn't peaceful anymore. My smart home says my door opened at 2:15 a.m., written by Hokons. I didn't always live alone. After Paul and I separated, I kept the house. A modest 4-bedroom, mortgage paid off. 3 months on, and half his furniture was still piled in the living room, waiting for him to collect. How many times do I have to tell you? He'd yell over the phone, "I'll be back, you can count on that. And God help me if there's so much as a scratch." I changed the locks the next morning. There was a lot I didn't know about Paul. This was the first time I'd truly lived alone. No Paul, no flatmate, just me and 3 empty bedrooms. Even in a gated neighborhood, break-ins happened. I'd chewed my nails down to stubs over it. I researched smart home technology. If I was doing this, I was going all the way. Smart bulbs, door sensors, automated security. I found a service that met all my needs and ordered with express delivery. It was all tied to one app that logged everything. Every light switched on, every door opened, logged. There was a shortage of security cameras. The packages would arrive within 4 to 6 weeks, they said. That was 2 months ago. I'd have emailed the courier for an update, but I forgot all about it once I started skimming the logs. I'd been having a problem. Lights would switch on in random rooms. The manual warned it might, but this was consistent. Daily. I'd be eating a salad in the living room and the gap under the laundry door would light up. The laundry leads to a back door. A rat, possibly. Something had gotten in and was triggering the sensors. Then it started happening more often. The laundry, the garage, even the living room while I was cooking in the kitchen. I opened the app to check the logs. Bedroom door. Opened. 2:14 a.m. I stared at it for a long time. My bedroom was an ensuite. I don't leave the room at night. Bedroom door. Closed. 5:58 a.m. Just before my alarm goes off. False positives. That's all they were. Same as the lights. I locked the bedroom door and called my lawyer, Greg Duggins. "Are you sure you're still in San Francisco?" I asked. "Yes, positive," said Duggins. "He'll be in the States for another week." "Okay," I said, "if you say so." I set the phone down on the bedside table and looked at the door. San Francisco. Right. I turned the handle once to make sure it was locked. I returned to the app and scrolled further down the logs. Laundry door, open, 11 p.m. Laundry light, 11:01 p.m. Entryway light, 11:03 p.m. Hallway light, 11:03 p.m. Second floor hallway light, 11:04 p.m. From then until my bedroom door opened at 2:14 a.m., nothing. I called the cops to report a break-in. While I waited, I kept looking at the timeline. What were they doing on the landing all that time? None of the rooms had their lights triggered. The only place to hide was the linen closet, but there was no space for anything other than a small critter. A rat, like I thought. I chewed my lip and opened the bedroom door. The linen closet was within an arm's reach. I reached for the handle. Knock, knock, knock. Jesus. I let go of the handle and rushed downstairs to let the police in. Afternoon, ma'am. We're responding to a call for a break-in. Yes, come in. I showed them the logs. They agreed it was strange. Just me. New locks, I said. Well, there's no sign of forced entry, but there are a few scratch marks around the keyhole. If you've got a new lock, it's not uncommon to scratch the keyhole while your muscle memory adjusts. But it's possible someone broke in, right? Well, the door was locked from the inside when we got here, so I doubt it, he said, chewing at his overgrown mustache. Show us the rooms and we'll have a look over. Ease your mind. I showed them all the rooms on the first floor and the bedrooms on the second floor. There wasn't much for them to do. They noted the break-in and advised me to follow up on getting those cameras installed. I dusted Paul's junk and made dinner. I didn't eat much, just poked at my food, scrolling through my contacts. I had 4 friends who would pack an overnight bag and be here within an hour, but I hadn't spoken with any of them since the divorce. They'd bring up Paul, and all I wanted to was to forget about him and all his shit he kept promising to pick up. I locked up and went to bed. After an hour of flipping my pillow to the cool side, I gave up and checked the logs. No new alerts. Part of me wished I had never installed the app. I would have been sound asleep by now. To calm myself down, I opened Google and started browsing apartments in my area. Units, suites, something with a lobby and a night guard. Light flashed under my bedroom door. A notification blipped on my phone. Second floor hallway light. 10:58 p.m. I gripped the bed sheets. Hello? The light switched off. For a second, I thought I'd seen 2 shadows, spaced about a shoe length apart. I refreshed the page. No new logs. No other lights triggered. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. I used the app to turn on the hallway lights and looked under the gap. The shadows were gone. No one is there, I told myself. If someone were there, they'd be in the hallway. I'd see their feet, or they'd have gone to another room, which would have triggered the light. The only other area on the second floor was the linen closet, in arm's reach from my door. Did I ever check it? I gripped the bedroom door handle. Open, reach, grab, open. I cracked open the bedroom door. Bzzzt. Fuck. I slammed it shut. Bedroom door opened 11:05 p.m. Idiot. I opened the bedroom door and peered through the crack. Floorboards, wall, no shadows. I opened it further, looking at the linen closet. Grab open, that's all. Then I can go to bed. I gripped the handle. I've got a gun, and I will shoot. I lied. No answer. I'd been hoping there would be one. Then I wouldn't have to open the door. All right, it's your funeral. I ripped open the closet door. Sheets, blankets, a vacuum cleaner. A gap next to the vacuum that hadn't been there before. I looked closer. Something wet pooled in the corner. I sniffed the air. Ammonia. Urine. Light beamed up the staircase. Hallway light, 11:07 p.m. A shadow moved down it. Quick steps echoed off the walls. Entryway light, 11:07 p.m. Laundry light, 11:08 p.m. Laundry door open, 11:08 p.m. My heart was in my throat. I moved toward the noise. as if I'd convinced myself I really did have a gun. I stopped at the landing. "Hey, I saw you." I went down. All the lights were still on. Paul's furniture cast long shadows across the living room. The shade on his lamp turned slowly. Both laundry doors were open. I could see through to the side yard. They'd left. I stood in the laundry doorway and looked out at the side yard. My phone burned in my hand. I'd been squeezing it. No way of knowing who was in my home. I moved to close the door. The smell hit me again. Stronger. I looked back towards the stairs to the linen closet, right outside my bedroom. I hadn't checked it earlier. I had my hand on the handle. I thought about the hours where nothing had triggered. The time I spent lying in bed. The time they spent crouched in the linen closet, right outside my door. Listening. Waiting for me to go to sleep. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying forest Reddit stories. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Your guys' support really does mean the world. And yeah, what did you think about today's stories? I loved all of these stories so much. I love the forest stories, the skinwalker stories, and just this type of vibe. You know what I mean? And if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will enjoy some other videos on the channel. So go check out some other videos on the channel. And yeah, make sure you also follow my Instagram and follow my Spotify. That also helps a ton. And all right, thank you guys so much for watching. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Right now, you're watching this video on a screen, and that screen is innocent. Or it can be a doorway to something darker. One wrong click, one stray curiosity, and you can find yourself trapped in a corner of the internet that's so twisted, so grotesque, and so horrifying, it changes you forever. Cult leaders who live stream their own delusions, rescue videos that are anything but rescues, and blogs written by monsters who believe the world owed them forgiveness. Today, we're opening doors most people scroll past and leaving no rock unturned and finding the worst corners of the World Wide Web. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into some horrifying internet rabbit holes. The fifth nail. According to one myth, the gypsies crafted 5 nails for Christ's execution, not 4. The 5th nail was made to pierce his heart, but the gypsies kept it hidden. In some stories, the women are punished, and in others, they are rewarded. This 5th nail is said to have once been an existing religious artifact with special healing powers. Its existence today is somewhat questionable, unless, of course, you consider the philosophical symbolism. The quote I just read, though it seems harmless, is anything but. It's an excerpt from one of the most disturbing pieces of online literature I have ever read. A collection of blog posts by a sick, demented criminal. And although normally the blog is very difficult to find, I scoured the internet and finally got my hands on it. A harrowing view into the mind of Joseph Edward Duncan III, American serial killer, on his infamous 5th Nail blog. Joseph Edward Duncan III was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, on February 25th, 1963. His father was a military man on active duty, so the family moved every year or two, all across the United States. He had many siblings and, for the most part, had a good early childhood. Although he claims it was awful, his siblings insist it was a good home. In 1979, his parents decided to separate. His older sisters moved out on their own. His younger brother went to live with his father, and Joseph, alone, lived with his mother. Now, very little is known about his childhood from that time forward, but we do know about his actions. Because Duncan, when living in Tacoma at the age of 15, held a 9-year-old boy hostage at gunpoint and did unspeakable things to him. That was his first criminal offense that we know of. The following year, he stole a car and was sent to an all-boys group home for juvenile offenders called the Jesse Dyslin Boys Ranch, which, by the way, this boys ranch could be a whole video by itself. Very problematic institution, but that's not the topic we're covering today. While he was there, he admitted to a therapist that before the age of 16, he had brutalized an estimated 13 younger boys by various different means, including binding their hands and feet before carrying out his sadistic, perverted acts on them. I'd like to reiterate that I said estimated, as in he wasn't sure of an exact number. Estimated. He was released from the boys' home in 1980, and in that same year, he broke into a neighbor's house, stole their guns, kidnapped another preteen, and did the same shit he did to the other estimated 13 boys. So yeah, this guy was a monster. And from what I know of him, he was always a monster. After this final attack at 17 years old, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He served 14 of those and was let out on parole in 1994. Duncan settled in Seattle, where he tried to keep his head down. He spent 2 years as a free man doing unspeakable things we'll discuss later. Then, 2 years later, in 1996, he was caught violating his parole by smoking weed and was again in jail. After several weeks, he was released again under new probationary conditions. After his release, unbelievably, he violated parole again and was rearrested again and was finally released in 2000 at the turn of the century. This time, he wanted a whole new start, so he moved to Fargo, North Dakota to be closer to his mother and adult siblings. But Duncan had some resentments. After all that, all of his sick crimes, leaving behind 14 victims in the wake of his sadism before the age of 16, he felt he was treated wrongly. Duncan believed that he shouldn't be judged for his crimes, and without a platform to speak his mind, in 2004, he started making blog posts. He called it Fifth Nail. Here is an excerpt from his first ever post, edited for decency, which I'm gonna say was incredibly difficult. January 4th, 2004. Just found out that a 5-year-old girl went missing from Chisholm, Minnesota on June 14th, 2003, this year. I did not even know until today that this happened, so I tried to figure out what I was doing that day, since I'm always afraid of getting accused when something like this happens. You might say that finding out about the girl missing is the most proverbial last straw, because of all the other recent incidences in the news lately, especially regarding missing people and the resulting intensification of the persecution of perverse criminal offenders. I've decided to start this blog as a sort of check and balance of where I am. This is for my own safety. I figure it is just a matter of time before I am falsely accused of some crime or another. I already had the police at my door telling me some women downtown were waving my picture around that they printed from the internet, accusing me of harassing them for a date. The visits was very intimidating and not friendly. I was warned that I was being watched as a known perpetrator of perverse crimes. The visit made me consult an attorney for advice. He told me there was nothing I could do unless charges were filed. I feel like a southern black man, just wondering when the lynch mob is going to show up at my door. His paranoia, it turns out, was correct. Remember that 2-year period where Duncan was free before, being arrested 2 more times? Well, turns out the police suspected he wasn't keeping his head down in that time frame. They believed his crimes had only gotten worse. And while Duncan was blogging about his woeful existence as one of the most disgusting human beings I've ever had the misfortune of learning the name of, the police were piecing together his latest sadistic crime. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to read one more excerpt from his blog. There's about 2 years of regular entries, and most of them are absolutely vile. And frankly, I don't want to read any more than I have to. So just to get a clear picture of this man, here's another entry for you from his infamous online diary. And viewer discretion, because this is one of the more insane ones I found. February 2nd, 2005. I committed a perverse crime when I was very young. I was sentenced to a perverse crimes program for adults where half the men in my treatment group sat and fantasized about me. After 2 years, I was a senior member when the state therapist paid a surprise visit to my mother's house and propositioned her, saying it would help your son in the program if you cooperate with me. When she told me about it, I quit the program and was sent to prison, where accordingly to at least one official report that was written before I was sentenced, because of his appearance and age, he would likely be mistreated by other inmates if sent to prison. True story. I thought I would only do a few years and get out not having to be around such evil people who represent the system. But because of hysteria, I ended up spending over 12 more years in prison before finally being awarded parole. All my psych reports say I am a low risk. I was just a kid acting out of confusion over my own experiences. And studies show conclusively that my type of offense is rarely repeated. And yet almost 30 years later, while I have no parole, nor have I ever committed a new crime, the police insist on knocking on my door several times a year, and sometimes in the wee hours. Check that I still live here. I have no privacy at all. Anyone in the state, country, even world can find out where I live, what I look like, and what I did when I was a kid just by typing my name on any web browser. This does not only hurt me. If that was all, I could accept it because what I did was bad. But it hurts my mother, my family, my friends, and even my neighbors who thought I was a great guy. Until they find out. Then they are afraid of me. It hurts society because it scares people into thinking every strange person is a suspect, and at the same time it deceives them into thinking the government can make them safe by telling them about the bad ones. Even the Fargo police website admits few convicted, perverse criminals ever reoffend, so some of the more ignorant people in the world will read this and think they deserve it. I call these people ignorant because they don't see the hurt they are causing. More children, more victims, just because they are afraid to admit their own secret desires. I cannot express to you all how much I absolutely, to my core, fucking despise this man. The fact that I just had to speak those words out loud disgusts me. But it's important for you to know who this man was. Irredeemable scum. One of the worst people I've ever written about. Bar none. And the self-proclaimed innocent Duncan was about to go on a killing spree. May 16th, 2005. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The grown family are spending the night together. They were a tight-knit household, a loving family. The mother of the household, Brenda, then 38, was asleep in bed with her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie. In the adjacent room slept her kids, 13-year-old Slade, 9-year-old Dylan, and 8-year-old Shasta. It had been a peaceful, uneventful day. And tonight, they were all resting easy. But not for long. At approximately 11 p.m., Joseph Edward Duncan broke into the home. Brenda woke up and rushed into Dylan and Shasta's bedroom. Someone's in the house. She gathered the kids with her boyfriend, and they ran into the living room, trying to escape. When they encountered Duncan, dressed in all black, carrying a gun, Duncan tied up the family. At some point, he pulled Dylan and Shasta outside, leaving them alone on the lawn. Though immobile, inside the sound of sickening thuds could be heard as Duncan bludgeoned the boyfriend, mother, and eldest son to death. The two surviving children, Dylan and Shasta, were kidnapped. For 6 weeks, Duncan took them to campsites and did unspeakable things to them. After 5 weeks, he accidentally killed Dylan when a shotgun misfired. After the death of her brother, Shasta was nearly killed also, but she convinced him not to by using his family nickname, Jet. Eventually, the two were found at a Denny's in Shasta's hometown of Coeur d'Alene. Shasta is the only surviving member of the grown family. Joseph Edward Duncan III was arrested and convicted of murder for the nighttime massacre of the grown family. But that's not all. Remember that 2-year parole period? Turns out he spent that time on another, earlier killing spree. He was found responsible for the deaths of Samiaho White, 11 years old, her half-sister, Carmen Cubayas, 9 years old, and Anthony Martinez, 10 years old. The jurors who sentenced Joseph Duncan to the death penalty had to be offered counseling for the horrific evidence shown on trial, including a 33-minute video of him physically attacking one of his victims. He died at the age of 58 from brain cancer. The Fifth Nail blog is an X-ray into the mind of a horrific, disgusting vermin known as Joseph Edward Duncan III. Like I said, there are 2 years of blog posts, but honestly, you might want to skip this rabbit hole. There's a ton of information, a ton of description and detail on his Fifth Nail blog, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters in this story are the victims. All of them. Young and gone way too soon. I hope they can rest easy knowing this man can't hurt anyone else ever again. Animal exploitation. 5 years ago, a video was posted to YouTube titled "Rescue the Pitiful Little Dog Falling Down the Drain. Screaming for help, nobody cares." In the video, a man is walking down an old, craggy sidewalk on his way to work when he hears a strange noise. He stops by an open crack in the ground to listen, and what he hears is a puppy in distress. Somehow, it got stuck in an abandoned storm drain. Thankfully, there's no grate, and the man is able to rescue the little dog. He crawls through the weeds, deep under the sidewalk, and pulls out a dirty little pup, crying and looking confused. The video has tens of thousands of views, and the channel behind it produced dozens of similar rescue videos, puppies in distress, dirty, mangled, broken, and of course a heroic figure swooping in to save them. Across all their content, the channel has amassed millions of views and hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I watched the video in absolute horror, not because the puppy was in danger, but because something about it didn't feel right. These types of videos are unfortunately very common on all of the popular video streaming platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. At first, it seems perfectly innocent. A group of kittens drowning in a river, a puppy with a broken leg, and an unwitting hero swooping in to save the poor, desperate creature. These videos garner incredible attention, get shared by every grandma with a smartphone. But the terrifying reality is, a lot of these videos are staged. When we watch Rescue the Pitiful Little Dog, there are clear signs that this video isn't genuine. Firstly, the man is already recording. He walks down the street on his way to work without a care in the world, when he just happens to stumble upon a puppy whining in a crack in the ground. In fact, he doesn't even stop to find where the whining is coming from. The camera just glides down perfectly to a single half-an-inch wide crack in the sidewalk, almost like he knew exactly where to look. And then all of a sudden, there's a second camera. Someone else is recording him rescuing the puppy. Not only do we never see this person behind the camera, I thought our hero was on his way to work. Who is this person? Is it a coworker? Well, in a way, it is. You see, oftentimes these videos are coming from economically poor countries, and with the surging popularity of animal videos in the early 2000s, people wanted a way to make some money, and nothing gets as many shares, likes, and comments as animal rescues. Unless you're a robot, watching an animal being saved is going to make you feel something, and that's for the vast majority of people, and you might just want to share that feeling with others. Because of this, animal rescue videos aren't just popular, they're lucrative. Millions of views can equal hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars on certain video sharing platforms. But how often does one find an animal in distress? Well, unless you're working for animal control, not often. I'll ask you this. How many times have you encountered anything like this in your own life? An animal in distress, tucked away under a sidewalk or lost in a storm drain? I bet most people could count on one hand the number of times, and truthfully, it might be zero. So if you're living in a poor nation, and if you want to start a business farming animal rescue videos, how do you do it? Do you wait around hoping to find an animal in distress? No, these people don't wait for danger, they are the danger. They purposefully endanger animals behind the scenes, and once the cameras are rolling, they can swoop in and save them. Here are some other video titles I encountered across many of the still active animal rescue accounts. Rescue the dog tied on the motorcycle. Rescuing a paralyzed abandoned puppy. Rescue 3 poor puppies in a plastic bag. These are not accidental discoveries. They're not spontaneous rescues. They're by design, each of them planned, staged, and recorded to pull at your heartstrings, garner your sympathy, and make a whole lot of money. But it's not just puppies. There are whole hosts of other species being tormented online. Puppies, monkeys, chickens, anything with 4 legs and a heartbeat is being exploited online right now. The most common format is animal abandoned by its owner, which accounts for about 30% of all fake rescue videos, but there are many more that are popular. Formats like an animal is almost attacked by a predator, where a baby animal will be put next to a snake and saved at the last second. Or animal saved from beneath rubble, where the people making the videos literally bury these poor creatures alive, and this sick trend isn't going away anytime soon. I found a Reddit post from 5 years ago listing 44 accounts that were most definitely allegedly producing fake content. Many of them have since been shut down or have rebranded amidst backlash, but some are still alive and kicking, despite the dangerous, disgusting, inhumane content. And there are so many other channels. Once you start looking for similar content, similar rescue videos, it just goes on and on. Anytime one gets shut down, 2 more seemingly take its place. And the horrible part about it is you can never be sure what's real and what isn't. I just recently saw a video of a monkey drowning in a river, getting rescued by a guy on a boat, and I have no idea if it was staged or not. And that's a disturbing thought. That really, there's no verifiable way to sift between the good and the bad. Everything is suspect once you kind of learn this. The type of animal exploitation, fake rescue videos are a rampant issue on all social media platforms. But what if people don't want to see an animal saved? What if they hate that animal so much they'd like to see it hurt, injured, maimed, even killed? Well, that's when we get into another type of animal endangerment, and a group so disgustingly evil it boggles my mind. The monkey haters. In 2024, a documentary titled Free Minnie was broadcasted on the BBC. It tells the real-life story of Minnie, a female long-tailed macaque, and how she was saved from her years of brutal captivity. In 2022, a woman named Kapetinich had just finished a long day of work, was browsing through recommended videos on social media when she discovered a cute monkey video. She watched it, liked it, and went to bed. The next day, More monkey videos, this time in funny costumes, doing unnatural tasks, playing, dancing, juggling, what have you. Before long, her feed was nothing but monkeys, and the content slowly became more and more disturbed. Monkeys getting slapped, sprayed with water, and one monkey being physically brutalized. That monkey was Minnie. The lady ended up in contact with another man, Dave Guptar, who had also taken note of the monkey haters in their horrible, inhumane videos. They shared their knowledge and became something of a team. They tried to find similarities between videos, but the more they watched, the further they dug, the more despicable it became. Monkeys weren't just being injured, not anymore. Some were being killed. And the people watching, the sick audience of thousands, were loving it. But one monkey appeared in more content than all of the others. Her name was Minnie. She was just a baby, and she was seen in countless videos being hurt ruthlessly. Seeing this poor, innocent baby being hurt and exploited for entertainment was too much to bear. They had to do something. Together, the duo approached animal activist Nina Jackal. She knew about Minnie, but she didn't know the full extent of what was happening. When she saw the content being produced on social media, she was both horrified and enraged. Nina began her own investigation. She discovered that every once in a while, in the comments, people were offering to pay the man who was hurting Minnie, and the response was always the same: add me on Telegram. Now, for those of you who don't know, Telegram is like the Tor browser, but for private messaging. It's meant to be completely private and keep your messages hidden, even from service providers. She followed the breadcrumbs and discovered that there were entire dark web forums dedicated to buying and selling content on Telegram. Much worse than anything available on social media, drownings, or flat out murder. And this wasn't one man creating these videos. There were multiple across nations who made a living torturing innocent animals. I mean, how messed up is this? One of the largest brokers of these horrible videos, the self-proclaimed king of brutality, was a man from the United States called Mike McCartney, a 48-year-old former motorcycle gang member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and card-carrying Confederate sympathizer. He had taken a liking to the monkey videos, especially Minnie. He spent his days selling videos, disturbing videos among customers, and he made a good amount of money doing it. But even he wasn't at the top of the food chain when it came to monkey haters. Mike McCartney operated on a Telegram channel called Ape's Cage, ran by the mysterious Mr. Ape. Mr. Ape ran the communications between buyers and vendors and created some videos himself. He would ask for ideas from the community, what tools to use. But his most popular video involved a blender. Absolutely horrible, disgusting, morally reprehensible human beings. But while most monkeys died, Minnie survived. Minnie lived to see her first birthday, and for that, she was a celebrity amongst monkey haters. She was the sadistic trophy of their community, said Mike McCartney. The Babe Ruth, the Marilyn Monroe, the Elvis. In this demented little circle of ours, that was Minnie. Eventually, by looking for commonalities in the videos, they were able to identify some of the perpetrators. Police agencies in multiple countries were contacted to track down and arrest these individuals, and one by one, they were all taken offline. By tracking the flow of money after each arrest, they eventually found Mr. Ape, and although we don't know his name, we know he was a Florida man in his mid-20s, and he had been running his sick Telegram since the time he was in college, and Minnie's owner was finally arrested. For Minnie the monkey, we don't know exactly what happened to her over those years in captivity. At least, I'm not looking for those videos because I don't want to know, personally. But we do know her injuries at the time of her owner's arrest: broken jawbone, missing teeth, bruises, scars, and intense psychological trauma. Today we know that Abe's cage has been disbanded. The broker, Mike McCartney, is facing heavy prison time, as well as other distributors. And many of the monkey hater content creators have been arrested and charged. But just like the fake rescue videos, this all boils down to one major point. This content isn't dead. At the end of the day, these two stories are just the tip of the iceberg. While social media platforms attempt to regulate this type of content, sometimes it slips through the cracks. And as criminals get smarter, it gets harder and harder to stop people like this. For both of these stories, the rabbit hole goes much deeper than just this information. It's basically endless. You could spend days going deeper and deeper into the sadistic, secretive networks of animal exploitation rings online, but at least for me, I won't be going any deeper anytime soon. Love has won. Amy Carlson was born on November 30th, 1975 in McPherson, Kansas. She was a child of divorce, splitting her time between Kansas and Oklahoma City. Amy was described as smart from an early age. She did well in school, always had good grades, sang for the school choir. But while her academics were thriving, behind the scenes, her home life was falling apart. After years living with her father, an abusive stepmother, the pain became too great. And so Amy moved in with her mother, eventually relocating to Texas. Here she wanted to begin her new life, but above all, she wanted love, affection, the all-American nuclear family. But Amy had trouble keeping relationships. She'd meet a man, they'd have a child, and then they'd break up. By the time Amy was 30 years old, she had been married 3 times and had 3 beautiful children. She supported them by working as a manager for McDonald's, but she wasn't happy. She neglected her children, and after her 3rd child was born, she began to distance herself from the family unit she fought so hard to create. Why? Well, around this time, she started getting involved in New Age religion, which I'd categorize here as a more radical form of spirituality. Think holistic medicine, crystals, and tarot, but for Amy, she took it to another level. She believed in multiple dimensions of spirituality, like metaphysical dimensions, soul reincarnation, the healing power of loving energy, which, to be fair, some of this isn't very strange. Many Eastern religions are built on these same beliefs, but her beliefs were evolving. Online, she met a male called Amaranth White Eagle. See what I'm saying? And he convinced her that she was divine. Amy wasn't some mortal working at McDonald's. No, she was Mother God, a being that had been alive for as long as time. Someone that had reincarnated into many bodies. The Hawaiian god Pele, Cleopatra, Jesus, Harriet Tubman. She claimed that in a past reincarnation, Donald Trump was her father, and before that, Elvis Presley was her son. Eventually, in 2007, she had become so convinced of her otherworldly spiritual powers, she abandoned her life, went no contact with her 3 children and her family, and disappeared to Colorado to be with her muse. Together, Amy and White Eagle would form a new religious group. And when I say group, I mean cult, called the Galactic Federation of Light. Now, before I continue, I want to make this abundantly clear. We're going to hear a lot about Amy throughout this story, and she does some weird things, some irresponsible things, and some downright dangerous things. But I want us to remember, this is a sick woman. She was influenced by White Eagle, who I'm sure was influenced by someone else, and all of them were influenced by a whole lot of drugs. So I'm not discounting the gravity of her actions. I'm just saying she was just as much a victim as she was a perpetrator. Even her daughter, when later interviewed, wants us to remember Amy as a human being who was sick, not just a crackpot cult leader. And I think it's important to make that clear. Moving on, she moves to Colorado, and together with White Eagle, they create a website. Weekly, they post about their doctrines. taking the moniker Mother and Father God, while their partnership in the Galactic Federation was purely managerial. Behind the scenes, they were heavily romantic, and in 2009, they posted their first YouTube video. Truth is a brilliant symphony. The message is very difficult to follow. Amy Carlson's Mother God, hosting convoluted talks about truth, God, angels, the universe, energy, and atoms. Now, over the course of many more videos, we begin to understand her evolving beliefs in better detail. Amy Carlson was 19 billion years old, a deity called Mother God, and had birthed all of creation. Father God was her second-hand man, and sometimes her lover. She accessed the fifth dimension via contact with the Galactics, a communication of dead celebrities like Robin Williams and Whitney Houston, who served as dimensional spirit guides. She had been reincarnated 534 times, and the job of her current incarnation was to lead exactly 144,000 people to salvation in her mysterious fifth dimensional heaven. And soon enough, the group had its first passenger, Miguel Lamboy. Miguel was the first person to support the Galactic Federation, and he took a special interest in Amy and the inner workings of her spiritual vessel. He would become the group's logistics director, managing the finances. The minutes of her first follower began a long cycle for the Galactic Federation under Amy's control. She would frequently eject people who didn't fit her doctrine or those who didn't agree with her, and this complete control became very toxic and dangerous very fast. When the group joined TinyChat, a website where you can create custom chat rooms accessed by random people, the Galactic Federation of Light began to develop a larger following. And this pattern of Amy's controlling, dictatorial nature began to rear its ugly head. Here's an excerpt from a Redditor who had a first-hand account with the group early on, and the post reads as follows. I first met Amy back in 2013 through the Galactic Free Press and TinyChat platform. Back then, LHW did not exist yet, but the cult-like recruiting tactics were being developed. Miguel Lamboy, who went by Michael Silver, had an administrative presence along with Amy and a few others. Many of us would join online together nightly to share spiritual videos, music, meditations, etc. Honestly, we weren't there because of Amy. We just enjoyed the interactive platform. It was a fun hangout with like-minded people from around the world. We initially tolerated Amy and the first Father God's controlling mechanisms. They would temporarily block you or kick you out of the chat room if you said anything that was contrary to their thinking. But the most interesting and engaging conversations and interactions almost always took place once Amy had left the chat for the night. I had a few one-on-one Skype encounters with Amy. Sadly, I saw right through the con that was developing. Amy even invited me to join her in Dunsmuir, California, which I declined. In late 2013, as the Galactic Federation scene started to devolve into a more cultish setting, I went out and started my own spiritual TinyChat. About 20 or so people followed me over there from GFP. Amy and her followers would daily try to get us to rejoin her. As per this user's story, Amy began to develop a new personality. Gone were the days of innocent spirituality and happy-go-lucky values. No. Her rule was becoming stern and absolute. If someone didn't align with her beliefs, she expelled them or blocked them, ostracized them from the community. But that was just online. Around this time, she gained a second follower, Andrew Profasi, who wanted desperately to worship Amy. The two began a romantic relationship, and before long, Amy expelled Amaranth White Eagle, the first Father God, and replaced him with Andrew. Just like that, the man who started it all, the one who had filled Amy's mind with delusions of grandeur and elevated purpose, was abandoned by Her Majesty. his mother god, and the delusion he created developed a life of its own. With the help of Miguel Lamboy and her new, more obedient father god, the group began to expand. People from across the country made the migration to join the goddess reincarnate. People we'd later see on live streams and in community videos: Hope, Aurora, Faith. Together, they traveled from Colorado to Oregon to California, spreading their ridiculous gospel to anyone that would listen: the desperate, the defunct, the lame, and the lonely. A small convent of lost, gullible souls to poison with her doctrine. But she couldn't do it with the same old ideas she developed with White Eagle. No, she wanted a fresh start. Though the same spiritual hierarchy remained, with Amy at the top of the pyramid, the optics had changed, and the Galactic Federation of Light became the now infamous, fully formed Love Has Won cult. Amy implemented new rules for the group: no drinking, no smoking, a strict dietary plan, and an even stricter sleep schedule. Members of Love Has Won were only allowed to sleep for 4 to 5 hours a day. In many videos, followers can be seen falling asleep as other members attempt to shake them awake, but they scarcely do. The group called this spiritual discipline, but from the outside, it began to look more like torture. These types of strict rules are common among cults, frequently cited as brainwashing tactics. Followers are more likely to be obedient if their freedoms are revoked, and their reliance becomes upon the group itself. If you wanted to join Love Has Won, you had to leave your family completely. These tactics amassed them a group of approximately 15 to 20 who lived with Amy, and whatever father god was present at the time, moving from state to state. And because of their recent expansion, they needed more money, and they made it selling holistic medicine online, including colloidal silver. Now, colloidal silver is typically sold for its healing properties. At least, that's what it would be sold for, if it had any healing properties. In fact, colloidal silver has no bodily purpose, no recognized function, isn't an essential mineral, and when consumed, it does nothing but wreak havoc, inside and out. Consistent consumption is considered dangerous, and although it's technically legal, the CDC does not condone its consumption. That being said, people continue to sell it for its mystical, spiritual, non-existent healing properties. The group also made many claims to improve people's health without the use of meditation. Love Has Won promoted their ability to pray away cancer, chronic illness, depression. Of course, selling false remedies and prayer cures will ultimately garner the attention of the public. And before long, Amy and her followers were facing heavy backlash. But not just for their snake oil sales, they also publicly held beliefs in many conspiracy theories, ones that, frankly, tend to piss people off, believing that most American tragedies were hoaxes staged by the government's lesser energy minions. Needless to say, people have never and will never resonate with these extreme claims. And for those cities and towns hosting Love Has Won, they didn't enjoy having a cult in their community to brainwash young, feeble minds into joining their ranks. In 2020, Amy and the Love Has Won group briefly moved to Kauai in Hawaii, where she publicly claimed to be Pele, the Polynesian goddess of volcanoes, fire, and creation. Shortly after their arrival, locals began to protest. It was a hostile, angry environment. This random white woman came onto their property and proclaimed herself as one of the most revered deities in their culture, and the native Hawaiians were not having it. They feared, like so many others, the cult would attempt to indoctrinate their friends and family too, which of course they did attempt to do. Protesters began lighting driftwoods on fire and chanting prayers around the rental property the group was staying in. As the days continued, the protesters grew less patient and more violent. They began throwing rocks and eggs at the windows of the property. Group member Lauren Soares, who I referred to earlier by her chosen name, Aurora, captured video footage of the attack and the resulting broken window. It got so bad, the mayor of Kauai had to come and broker a negotiation between the two groups, eventually leading to the departure of Love Has Won from the island. And just like that, the group had returned to Colorado. In the year that followed, Amy's presence online became less and less frequent. Witnesses noticed her health was declining. She was getting thinner, smaller, quieter. Something was clearly wrong. But Amy sought no solutions to her obvious medical issue. As the weeks turned to months living with this illness, she became paralyzed from the waist down, and her skin became blue. As her health declined that December, on New Year's Eve, Amy had a conversation with her sister over Skype, who noted that Amy looked awful. Amy, in response, told her sister that she had cancer. It was the first time the pair had spoken in many years, and little did her family know, it was the last time they would hear from Amy ever again. In early April of 2021, the group relocated to an RV camp in Mount Shasta, Northern California, attempting to find new footing in different area, but were asked to leave due to overcrowding. After this, they made their final migration back to the Love Has Won mission house near Crestone, Colorado. On the journey, the group made a chilling Facebook post stating, "She has ascended," and the Love Has Won website was taken offline. In late April of 2021, Miguel Lamboy, head of finance at Love Has Won, contacted the police, saying that something awful had happened to Amy. When police arrived at the mission house, they discovered the unthinkable. Amy wasn't just dead. She had been mummified. Judging by the state of decay, she had died sometime during the trip back to Colorado, several weeks earlier. The group had wrapped her in a sleeping bag, tied it with Christmas lights, and covered her face in glitter, a final makeshift shrine to the empty vessel of their mother god. When asked what it was like transporting the corpse from California to Colorado, without any way of stopping the decomposition, the group responded, "You could smell God everywhere." But how did she die? Well, the corpse was blue-gray in color, and a photo taken just a little before death showed her emaciated blue-gray body, just barely clinging to life. Amy Carlson died from complications as a result of taking large amounts of colloidal silver. The same remedy she had peddled to countless others was the thing that killed her. 7 members of the group were charged with gross disrespect of a corpse, spending only a couple of weeks in jail before the charges were dropped. And Miguel Lamboy, the man responsible for the group's success, disappeared with the remaining $300,000 in the Love Has Won accounts. Today, the group is fractured. Group member and live streaming coordinator Aurora abandoned the original YouTube channel and created a spiritual successor called 5D Full Closure, which continued to post videos until August of 2025. Several other members have started popular social media accounts or businesses, but none to this day have reached the infamy that Love Has Won garnered. And I hope for the sake of others, they never do. But what I just covered isn't even half the story. There are so many more details we couldn't include, even with a full treatment. Hundreds of first-hand accounts, thousands of hours of video. There's actually a great documentary by HBO